The carriage left without her. Claire Whitmore stood in the pre-dawn mist, watching the Duke of Ashworth's estate shrink behind her with each step. Her silk slippers, ridiculous, impractical things, were already soaked through. The emerald pendant at her throat, worth more than most families earned in a year, felt like a noose. 24 hours ago, she'd been the future Duchess. The perfect choice. The suitable arrangement. Then she'd heard him laughing. Clara? Darling, she's adequate, manageable. Her father's debts made the negotiation wonderfully simple. One word. Manageable. She didn't cry, didn't scream. She just stopped pretending the cage was gilded enough to matter. Now here she was, 5 miles from the estate, 40 pounds in a drawstring purse, and absolutely no idea what happened next. But here's the thing about walking away from everything. You find out pretty fast what you're actually made of. So stick with me. Watch how far this goes. Drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far Clara's story travels. And if you've ever walked away from something that looked perfect on paper but felt like dying on the inside, hit that like button. You'll understand every step of this. The November air bit through Clara's traveling cloak, the only practical garment she owned. Everything else was designed for drawing rooms and dinner parties, engineered to make her look like exactly what she was supposed to be. Expensive, decorative, and silent. She'd grabbed what she could carry in 10 minutes. A change of clothes. The 40 pounds her mother had sent last month for incidentals. A leather-bound copy of Sense and Sensibility that Adrian had given her on their third formal visit, probably never read himself, just something his secretary purchased because ladies enjoy novels. The irony wasn't lost on her. Wasn't lost on. The road to the village was longer than it looked from the estate windows. Her feet ached. The hem of her dress was black with mud. And somewhere around mile 3, the reality of what she'd done started pressing in like the cold. She had no plan, no family to run to. Her father had made sure of that when he'd gambled away their home and then conveniently died, leaving her mother dependent on distant relatives who made their charity very clear. No friends, really. Just acquaintances who'd smiled at her across ballrooms while calculating her value. The Duke's house had been her escape route, her survival plan, and she'd just thrown it away because of one overheard conversation. Stupid, she muttered, her breath fogging in the dark. Stupid, stupid. Talking to yourself's the first sign, miss. Clara spun, heart hammering. A man stood beside a hay wagon that had materialized out of the mist like something from a ghost story. Older, weathered face, completely unbothered by the fact that a well-dressed woman was walking alone in the dark. First sign of what? Clara managed. Going mad. Or being already there. He studied her with the frank assessment of someone used to reading livestock. You running from something or toward something? Does it matter? Might do. Running from usually means you didn't plan well. Running toward means you've got somewhere to be. He jerked his head at the wagon. Village is 6 miles yet. You'll lose your feet in those shoes before you make half. Clara looked down at her slippers, then back at him. Every rule she'd ever learned about propriety screamed that accepting help from a strange man on a dark road was monumentally foolish. Then again, she'd already torched her entire future tonight. Might as well commit. I'd be grateful, she said. For the ride. He grunted and shifted a burlap sack. Name's Tom Bridger. And before you ask, no, I don't care who you are or what you did. None of my business. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Road's rough. He wasn't exaggerating. The wagon had all the suspension of a wooden crate tied to wheels. Every rut and stone translated directly into Clara's spine. Tom Bridger drove in silence, which suited her fine. She didn't trust her voice yet. The sky started shifting from black to gray around the time they reached the village. Helmsley. Clara had passed through it exactly once, in the Duke's carriage, on the way to meet his family. She'd barely glanced out the window. Now she looked. It wasn't picturesque. The buildings were old stone and newer brick, practical rather than charming. Smoke rose from chimneys. A dog barked. Someone was already up, sweeping the front of what looked like a baker's shop. Tom pulled the wagon to a stop near a coaching inn. This is me done. The Crown and Anchor there. He nodded at a 2-story building with peeling paint. They've got rooms. Mrs. Talbot runs it. Fair enough, if you've got coin. Clara climbed down, muscles protesting. Thank you, Mr. Bridger. He was already clicking his tongue at the horses. Then he paused. Word of advice, miss. Whatever you're running from, give it a week before you decide if you made a mistake. First few days, everything feels wrong. That's just the difference, not the choice. Then he was gone, wagon creaking down a side street. Clara stood there, dawn breaking properly now, watching the village wake up around her. Give it a week. She could do a week. Mrs. Talbot was a compact woman with gray hair scraped into a bun, so tight it looked painful. She took in Clara's appearance, muddy hem, quality fabric, expensive cloak, with one comprehensive glance. "Room's 3 shillings a week, meals extra," she said. No preamble. "I don't run a charity and I don't ask questions, but I don't tolerate drama, theft, or gentlemen callers. We clear?" "Perfectly." "You've got coin, I assume, not waiting on funds from somewhere?" Clara pulled out her purse, counted out 6 shillings. 2 weeks, and I'll need to find work." Something shifted in Mrs. Talbot's expression. Not quite approval, but close. Work doing what? Good question. Clara had been educated, extensively. She could play piano, speak French, watercolor adequately, recite poetry, manage a formal dinner for 30, and make conversation about nothing for hours. None of which translated into employable skills in a Yorkshire village. "I can read and write," she said. "Do sums. I've managed household accounts. I'm—" She hesitated, hating the word. "Reliable." "Reliable," Mrs. Talbot snorted. "Well, that's something. Rooms upstairs, end of the hall. Breakfast is at 7, dinner at 6. You miss it. You go hungry." The room was small. A narrow bed, a washstand, a single window overlooking the village square. The entire space would have fit inside Adrian's dressing room. Clara sat on the bed and felt the full weight of what she'd done. She had enough money for 2 months, maybe 3 if she was careful. After that, what? She had no references, no connections, no experience doing anything except being ornamental. The panic started rising in her chest, familiar and suffocating. Then she remembered Adrian's laugh. Manageable. She'd rather starve than be manageable. Mad. The newspaper was 3 days old, left in the inn's common room. Clara read it cover to cover while eating bread and cheese that cost 2 pence, twice what it should, but she was too tired to negotiate. Wanted. Governess for 2 children, ages 6 and 9. Must have references and experience with proper instruction. Inquire at Ashford House, North Road. Seamstress needed, experienced only. Apply Mrs. Harding's shop. Housekeeper for gentlemen's residence. Must provide character references. References. Always references. She kept reading anyway. Under the Positions Wanted section, someone had placed an unusual notice. Household management position available. Family of 4 seeking organized individual for general supervision of domestic affairs. Experience valued over credentials. Inquire. Reed Residence, Miller's Lane. Experience valued over credentials. Clara tore the notice out carefully. Miller's Lane was exactly what it sounded like. A rutted track leading to a cluster of houses near an actual mill. The Reed residence turned out to be a stone cottage with a sagging porch and a garden that had clearly been beautiful once but was now losing the fight against weeds. Clara knocked. Nothing. She knocked again. The door flew open and a boy of about 7 stared at her, face smudged with what might have been jam. "We're not buying anything, and Father said no more missionaries." "I'm neither," Clara said. "I'm here about the household position." "James? Who's at the door?" A man's voice, harried. "Some lady," James yelled back without breaking eye contact with Clara. Footsteps, then a man appeared behind the boy. Mid-30s, shirt sleeves rolled up, dark hair sticking up like he'd been running his hands through it. He looked exhausted. "I'm sorry," he said, not sounding sorry so much as defeated. "I should have taken that notice down. The position's filled." "When?" Clara asked. "I beg your pardon?" "When was it filled? The newspaper is from Monday." "Well," he blinked. "Yesterday. A woman from the village came by and—" "Ran away after 2 hours," a girl's voice interrupted. She appeared in the hallway, older than the boy, maybe 9. She said we were uncivilized and refused to take direction. The man, Reed, Clara assumed, closed his eyes briefly. "Alice, We discussed this. You said be honest. Alice looked at Clara with unsettling directness. Are you going to run away after 2 hours? Clara looked past them into the house. She could see a kitchen with dirty dishes stacked on every surface, laundry in a basket, unfolded, a pot on the stove, something burning. Your dinner's on fire, she said. Reed swore, actually swore, and bolted for the kitchen. Clara followed, brushing past the children. By the time Reed grabbed the pot, the bottom was scorched black. He dumped it in the sink with a clatter. Damn it, that was supposed to be soup. Clara surveyed the kitchen. It wasn't dirty, exactly, just overwhelmed, like someone was trying very hard and losing badly. Where's your wife? She asked. The silence was immediate and heavy. Dead, Alice said matter-of-factly. 18 months ago, consumption. Alice, you said be honest. Reed leaned against the sink, shoulders tight. Yes. Thank you, Alice. Very honest. Clara should leave. This was complicated, messy, probably a disaster waiting to happen. She had enough problems without adopting someone else's. But there was something about the way Reed was gripping that sink, the way Alice stood there, too adult, too careful, the way James was still watching from the doorway, quiet now. I'm not a governess, Clara said. I have no references. I've never held a position before. Reed turned to look at her. But I can manage accounts, organize a household, cook adequately, and teach basic lessons. I don't run from challenges, and I don't scare easily. She met his eyes. And I need this position as much as you need to fill it. Why? Fair question. Clara considered lying, spinning some acceptable story. Because 3 days ago I walked away from a very advantageous marriage and discovered I have no practical skills, limited funds, and no prospects. She gestured at the kitchen. This is the first opportunity I found that doesn't require me to prove I'm something I'm not. Reed stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. That might be the most honest thing anyone said to me in months. Honesty seems to be the house policy. It wasn't always. Alice decided we needed it after... He trailed off. After. Alice was still watching Clara with that unnerving directness. Can you read? Yes. Properly? Not just simple books? I've read Austen, Milton, Wordsworth, and more philosophy than I'd recommend to anyone. Can you teach mathematics? Through basic geometry and accounting, yes. What about Alice? Reed interrupted gently. Let the woman breathe. But Clara shook her head. No, let her ask. I'd rather know the expectations now. Alice crossed her arms. Can you make things work when they're broken? Not just accept them being broken? The question hit harder than it should. I'm learning, Clara said quietly. I'm not perfect at it, but I'm learning. Alice considered this. Then she looked at her father. I like her. Reed ran a hand through his hair again. Alice, we can't just... You said we needed someone who wouldn't quit. She hasn't quit yet, and she just saw our worst. Alice turned back to Clara. The last woman called us unmanageable. There was that word again. Clara smiled, sharp and real. I don't believe in unmanageable, just poorly organized. Reed looked between his daughter and Clara. Something shifted in his expression. Calculation, maybe hope. The position pays £15 a year plus room and board, he said. It's not much. It was actually more than Clara had hoped for. Hours are irregular, the children need teaching, but I also need help managing the house, the accounts, He gestured vaguely. Everything. I'm a surveyor. I'm gone 3-4 days a week sometimes. I need someone who can keep things from falling apart. I can do that. You haven't heard the worst part yet. Go on. I'm not good at this. Reed's voice was flat, honest. Any of this. I'm trying, but Helen, my wife, she was the one who knew how to make a house feel like a home. I just keep it from burning down, sometimes. Clara looked at the scorched pot. Sometimes? A ghost of a smile. Sometimes. When do I start? The room was in the attic, small, slanted ceiling, one window that stuck. But it was clean, and it was hers, and the lock worked. Clara unpacked her few belongings, hung her second dress on a peg, and sat on the narrow bed. Somewhere in Durham, the Duke of Ashworth was probably just waking up. Discovering her empty room, finding the letter she'd left on the writing desk. She'd kept it short. Adrian, I find I am unsuited to being manageable. Best of luck in your search for someone who is. Clara Whitmore. She wondered if he'd be angry. Embarrassed, probably. Inconvenienced, definitely. She didn't care. Clara stood and looked out the window. The village spread below, small, unremarkable, completely ordinary. Perfect. Bas. The first week was harder than Clara anticipated. Not the work itself. She'd managed larger households, coordinated more complex schedules. But those had been with trained staff, proper resources, and clear hierarchies. This was chaos held together with string and determination. James and Alice had been without structure for 18 months. They weren't wild, exactly, but they'd learned to fill the gaps themselves. Alice read voraciously, but refused to practice her handwriting. James could recite multiplication tables, but his room looked like a hurricane had passed through. And Ethan Reed, she'd learned his first name on day 2 when Alice had shouted, "Ethan, the privies flooded again," across the yard, was gone more than he was present. Survey work, he'd explained, looking apologetic. Lord Ashford is expanding his estate, needs new property maps. It's 3 weeks of work. Lord Ashford. Claire had frozen. In Durham? No, North Yorkshire. Different Ashford entirely. He'd paused. You know them? No. The lie came easily. Common name. He'd left the next morning, leaving Clara with 2 children, a flooded privy, and instructions to manage as you see fit. So she did. Day 1. She taught Alice and James how to organize their day. Wake at 7, breakfast at 7:30. Lessons until noon. Reading, mathematics, history. Afternoon chores, then free time. We don't have chores, James had protested. You do now. Age-appropriate ones. I'm not asking you to rebuild the house. What's age-appropriate? For you, keeping your room clean, helping with dishes, feeding the chickens. We have chickens? Turned out they had 4 chickens that had been living semi-feral in the back garden. Day 2. Clara tackled the kitchen. Every dish washed, every surface scrubbed. She found 3 pots with food so old it had fossilized. Helen used to say the kitchen was the heart of the house, Alice said quietly, watching from the doorway. Your mother was right. Father doesn't cook much, usually just bread and cheese. Well, we're going to change that. Day 3. The privy situation reached critical mass. Clara had to hire a man from the village to fix it, which cost 2 shillings she didn't strictly have authority to spend. She wrote it in the household ledger anyway with a note. Emergency repair. Privy non-functional. When she opened the ledger properly, she almost closed it again. Ethan Reed's accounting was a disaster. Entries were sporadic, sometimes illegible, often missing entirely. She found 3 months where he'd apparently just stopped recording anything. She stayed up past midnight that first week, reconstructing the accounts from receipts and bills stuffed in a drawer, building a picture of the household finances. It wasn't pretty. Reed made decent money as a surveyor, but expenses were chaotic. He was paying too much for basics, forgetting to collect debts people owed him, making decisions based on urgency rather than economy. Clara created a new system, separate columns for necessities, household maintenance, children's needs, and discretionary spending. She noted patterns. He was overpaying the butcher by nearly 20%. Day 4. She confronted the garden. Armed with borrowed shears and determination, she started cutting back the wilderness. Alice joined her, surprisingly knowledgeable about plants. Mother taught me, she explained, before she got sick. They worked in silence for a while, the only sound the snip of shears and birds. Do you miss her? Clara asked. Every day. Alice pulled at a stubborn weed. But not as much as Father does. He pretends he's fine, but he's not. Grief takes time. Everyone says that. But how much time? It's been 18 months and he still won't touch her things. Her dressing room is exactly how she left it. Clara had noticed. The door at the end of the hall, always closed. Maybe he's not ready. Or maybe he's scared if he moves anything, he'll forget her. Alice looked up, eyes too old. That's what I'd be scared of. That night, Clara wrote her first weekly report for Ethan. Mr. Reed, the children are adjusting to a structured schedule. Alice shows aptitude for literature and natural sciences. James needs work on focus, but excels at practical mathematics. Household expenses have been reorganized. I've identified several areas where costs can be reduced. The privy required emergency repair, 2 shillings documented. The butcher has been overcharging. I've addressed this. The house is in order. The children are fed, educated, and safe. We'll be here when you return, Miss Whitmore. She left it on the kitchen table where he'd find it. Day 5. A woman came to the door. Mid-40s, well-dressed, carrying a basket covered with cloth. I'm Mrs. Catherine Brown, she said, smiling, from the village church. I heard Ethan had hired someone new and wanted to welcome you properly. Clara recognized the tone. This wasn't welcome, it was reconnaissance. That's very kind. I'm Clara Whitmore. May I? Mrs. Brown gestured inside. Clara had no real authority to refuse. She let her in. Mrs. Brown's eyes swept the kitchen, the clean surfaces, the organized shelves, the children doing lessons at the table. My goodness, you've certainly made changes. The house needed organization. Of course. Though I must say, Ethan's always been so particular about how things are done. I'm surprised he gave you such freedom. Translation. Who are you, and why did he hire someone without our approval? Alice looked up from her book. Father said Miss Whitmore could manage as she saw fit, and she does it better than the last 3 people. Alice, manners, Clara said automatically, but Mrs. Brown's smile had tightened. 3 people? My, what a challenge you must have had, Mr. Reed, finding suitable help. We weren't the problem, James muttered. Clara shot him a look, and he subsided. Mrs. Brown stayed for exactly 15 minutes, asking questions disguised as pleasantries. Where was Clara from? What was her family? How had she heard of the position? Clara answered with careful truth. From the South, family circumstances had changed. She'd seen the newspaper notice. After Mrs. Brown left, Alice said, She's going to tell everyone you're suspicious. Probably. Does that bother you? Clara thought about ballrooms full of women who'd smiled at her while calculating her worth. Not particularly. Day 6. Clara took James and Alice to the village. They needed shoes. Both had outgrown their current pairs and were making do with too tight leather. The cobbler was a taciturn man named Harrow who measured their feet without comment. When Clara asked the price, he named a figure that was clearly inflated. That seems high, Clara said pleasantly. Mrs. Talbot at the inn mentioned you charged her nephew half that last month. Harrow's expression shifted. Did she now? She did. So I'll pay that price, or I'll take their measurements to the cobbler in Thornbury. A pause, then Harrow nodded. Fair enough. Outside, James looked at her with something like awe. How did you do that? Do what? Make him back down. Father always just pays what people ask. Your father is a kind man. Kind men get taken advantage of. Clara adjusted her shawl. The trick is being polite enough that they can't call you rude, and firm enough that they know you're not backing down. Alice was smiling. I like the way you think. Day 7. Ethan Reed returned. Clara heard the horse first, then boots on the porch. She was in the kitchen teaching Alice how to make proper pastry when the door opened. Ethan looked better. Still tired, but less defeated. He dropped his pack by the door and stopped, taking in the scene. Clean kitchen, organized shelves. His children, flour-dusted and laughing, actually learning something. Welcome back, Clara said. Dinner will be ready in an hour. He stared at her, then at the room, then back at her. You fix the shelf, he said. Clara glanced at the shelf that had been listing dangerously to one side. James and I did. It needed a new bracket. And everything else? The house is in order, Mr. Reed, as promised. She wiped her hands on her apron. Your report is on the desk in the study. I've documented all expenses and suggested several cost-saving measures. You made a report. Was I not supposed to? No, He ran a hand through his hair. Sorry, I'm not used to this. Used to what? Coming home to a house that functions. Alice hugged her father, leaving flower handprints on his jacket. Miss Whitmore is brilliant. She fixed everything, even James's room. Hey, James protested. It's true. It doesn't smell anymore. Ethan looked at Clara over his daughter's head. Something passed between them. Acknowledgement, maybe relief. Thank you, he said quietly. I'm just doing what you hired me for. But they both knew it was more than that. Week 2, the rhythm solidified. Ethan was home for 3 days, then gone for 4. When he was there, he worked in his study, preparing surveys and maps. The children gravitated toward him like plants toward light. They'd clearly missed him, but they also maintained the structure Clara had built. She found herself watching him sometimes. The way he interacted with Alice and James, patient, present, trying so hard to be enough for them. He caught her once, looking. "Sorry," Clara said. "I was just judging my parenting?" A wry smile. "Observing, you're good with them. I'm adequate with them." Helen was good. She knew what they needed before they asked. "I'm just trying not to break anything." Clara thought about broken things. Sometimes not breaking things is the best you can do. "Is that what you're doing? Not breaking things?" The question surprised her. "I suppose so." "Here's the thing I don't understand." Ethan leaned against the doorframe, genuinely curious. "You're clearly educated, well-spoken. You could have found a position in a better household, somewhere with actual staff, resources. Why here?" "I told you, I needed work." "You needed work that didn't require references. That's not the same thing." He waited. "I'm not asking for your life story, Miss Whitmore, but I am asking for enough truth that I know who's living in my house with my children." "Fair enough." Clara chose her words carefully. "I was engaged to be married. Advantageous match, or so everyone said. Then I discovered that my value to him was entirely transactional. So I left." "Just like that?" "Just like that." Ethan studied her face. "That took courage. Or stupidity. The verdict's still out." "No." His voice was certain. "It was courage. Stupidity would be staying." Clara felt something shift in her chest. Recognition, maybe. "My wife got sick very fast," Ethan said quietly. 3 months from diagnosis to death. And the worst part wasn't watching her die. It was realizing I'd built my entire life assuming she'd always be there. I didn't know how to run a house, manage the children's education, keep track of anything. Helen did all of it, and I just worked. You're doing it now, barely, and only because you're here keeping it together." He met her eyes. "So I guess what I'm saying is, I understand building a life around what you're supposed to do, then having it fall apart, and having to figure out who you are without it." They stood there in the hallway, 2 people learning how to reconstruct themselves. "The children adore you," Clara said. "That counts for something." "They adore you too. Alice actually told me yesterday that you're acceptably strict but not unreasonable." Clara laughed. "High praise from Alice. The highest." He hesitated. "I read your report, the budget restructuring. It's good work." "Thank you." "I'm serious. I've been hemorrhaging money without realizing it. You saved me at least 30 pounds in the first week alone." "It's just organization. It's more than that. It's seeing what needs fixing and actually fixing it." He straightened. "I'm raising your salary. 20 pounds a year." "Mr. Reed, that's not... It's fair. You're doing work that would normally require a housekeeper and a governess. 20 pounds is still underpaying you." Clara didn't know what to say. 5 extra pounds was months of security. "Thank you," she managed. He nodded and headed toward his study, then paused. "And Miss Whitmore? You can call me Ethan. Mr. Reed makes me feel like my father." After he'd gone, Clara stood in the hallway, a small smile on her face. Maybe this would work after all. Week 3 brought the first real crisis. James fell ill, fever, cough, that terrifying limpness that came with childhood sickness. Clara found him in the morning, flushed and glassy-eyed. "Don't tell Father," he mumbled. "He'll worry." "Your father needs to know." "He just left for a survey. If you tell him, he'll come back and lose the job." Ethan had left at dawn for a 3-day mapping project. Clara knew the family needed the income. She also knew James needed care. She made the call. Send word to Ethan, but not urgently. Let him know James was sick but being managed. Then she set about actually managing it. Cool cloths, willow bark tea, light broth. Alice helped, surprisingly competent for a 9-year-old. "I did this with Mother," she explained quietly. Near the end, Clara's heart cracked a little. By evening, James's fever had spiked higher. Clara was debating whether to call the doctor. Expensive, but necessary if this got worse, when Ethan burst through the door. "Where is he?" "Upstairs." "But Ethan—" He was already taking the steps two at a time. Clara followed and found him at James's bedside, one hand on his son's forehead. "It's high," he said tightly. "It is, but it broke once around noon. This is the second spike. Normal pattern for these things." "You've seen this before?" "I've nursed sick children." "Yes." Ethan looked at her, something raw in his expression. "If he gets worse, then we call Dr. Matthews. I've already sent word that we might need him." Some of the tension left his shoulders. "You're prepared." "I try to be." They sat vigil together through the night. Somewhere around 2 a.m, James's fever broke properly. His skin cooled, breathing evened out. Ethan slumped in the chair, relief and exhaustion warring across his face. "You should have told me immediately," he said, but there was no heat in it. "I made a judgment call. You needed the work. I needed to be here. You were here, the moment it mattered." Clara stood, every muscle protesting. "He's going to be fine. Children spike fevers. It's terrifying, but normal." Ethan looked up at her. "How are you this calm?" "Practice hiding panic." She managed a smile. "I'll make tea." In the kitchen, her hands finally shook. She gripped the counter and let herself feel the fear she'd suppressed all day. When she turned around, Ethan was there. "Thank you," he said, "for keeping him safe, for knowing what to do, for—" He trailed off. "Everything. It's my job. It's more than that, and you know it." They stood in the dark kitchen, and Clara felt the distance between them. Professional, careful, absolutely necessary, narrow just slightly. Then Alice appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Is James okay?" "He's fine," Ethan said, turning toward her. "Go back to bed, sweetheart." The moment broke. Clara busied herself with the tea, but something had shifted. By week 4, Clara had established a life that looked nothing like the one she'd left. She woke early, prepared breakfast, taught lessons. She managed accounts, negotiated with tradesmen, kept the house running. She read to the children at night. Alice preferred adventure stories. James liked anything with numbers. The village women still eyed her with suspicion, but she'd earned grudging respect. Mrs. Talbot had commented that the Reed house looks better than it has in years. The butcher no longer tried to overcharge. The baker's wife had actually smiled at her. Small victories. Clara wrote to her mother, carefully, offering no address, just letting her know she was alive and safe. She didn't expect a response. Her mother had made it clear that walking away from the Duke meant walking away from family support. She was fine with that. Ethan was gone more often than not, but when he was home, they'd developed a comfortable rhythm. Evening reports in the study, discussions about the children's progress, quiet conversations over tea after Alice and James were asleep. "Alice asked me today if you were staying forever," Ethan said one night. Clara's hand stilled on her cup. "What did you tell her?" "That I hoped so." He looked at her directly. "Was that wrong?" "No, just permanent." "Is that a problem?" Clara thought about it. A month ago, she'd had no plan beyond survival. Now she had structure, purpose, people who depended on her. "No," she said. "Not a problem." The smile he gave her was warm and real. That night, Clara lay in her attic room and realized something startling. She was happy. Not the performance of happiness she'd learned in drawing rooms. Not the anticipation of future security. Just content. Present. Real. It felt revolutionary. Week 5. Sunday. The village church. Clara had been avoiding it. Church meant questions, scrutiny, Mrs. Brown's sharp eyes. But Alice had asked, sweetly and persistently, if they could go. "Mother used to take us," she'd explained. "I miss it." So Clara went. The church was small, stone, drafty. She sat with James and Alice in a middle pew, very aware of the eyes tracking their movement. The sermon was about forgiveness. Clara stopped listening halfway through and studied the stained glass instead. St. Catherine, St. Margaret, women who'd chosen faith over convention. After the service, Mrs. Brown cornered her immediately. "Miss Whitmore, how lovely to see you joining us." Alice wanted to come. Of course, the children must miss their dear mother. Mrs. Brown's smile was sympathetic and sharp. It's wonderful that Mr. Reed has found such dedicated help. Translation: Who are you really? I'm fortunate to have the position, Clara said evenly. Indeed, though I must say, it's unusual for a young woman of your obvious education to take such a position. Most would seek something more suitable. There was that word again. Clara met her eyes. I've learned that suitable often means limiting. I prefer useful. Mrs. Brown blinked. Before she could respond, Ethan appeared at Clara's elbow. Mrs. Brown, always a pleasure. Mr. Reed, I was just getting to know Miss Whitmore better. I'm sure. He placed a hand on Clara's back, proper, professional, but present. If you'll excuse us, we have dinner to prepare. He steered Clara toward the door. Thank you, she muttered. Catherine Brown is a good woman, but she believes everyone's business is her business. He glanced at her. You handled her well. Practice. Outside, Alice and James were racing around the churchyard. Clara watched them, feeling that strange contentment again. You fit here, Ethan said quietly. Clara turned to him. What? With them. With us. You fit. He looked like he wanted to say more, but James came barreling over, demanding they go home for lunch. Clara filed the comment away, something to examine later. Week 6. Clara was in the study, updating the household ledger, when she heard the horse. Expensive horse. She could tell by the sound, the measured gait, the quality tack. She went to the window and felt her heart stop. Adrian Hale, Duke of Ashworth, was dismounting in front of the Reed house. For one wild moment, Clara considered running, out the back door, into the woods, disappear. Then Alice called out, Miss Whitmore, there's a fancy man at the door. Clara closed her eyes, took a breath, and went downstairs. Adrian stood on the porch, looking completely out of place. Too refined, too expensive, too much. He saw her and his expression shifted. Surprise, relief, something else. Clara, Your Grace, her voice was ice. I've been looking for you for 6 weeks. I noticed I didn't leave a forwarding address. Alice was watching from the hallway, fascinated. Clara gestured for her to go upstairs. For once, Alice obeyed. May I come in? Adrian asked. No. He flinched. Clara, please. I need to speak with you. Then speak, quickly. He glanced around, at the modest house, the simple garden, the complete absence of everything he represented. You left, he said, as if she might have forgotten. I did. Without explanation. I left a letter. That wasn't an explanation. That was a dismissal. Clara felt anger flare. I learned from the best. Adrian's jaw tightened. What you overheard. The truth? A conversation taken out of context. No, a conversation you thought I'd never hear. Clara crossed her arms. Tell me, Adrian, when you called me manageable, what context makes that acceptable? He had no answer. That's what I thought. Clara started to close the door. Wait. He put his hand on the frame. I made a mistake. Yes, you did. Clara, please. I've come to ask. He stopped, recalibrated. I want you to reconsider. Come back. We can start over. Why? The question seemed to throw him. Because we had an agreement. We had a transaction. I was your suitable choice. Remember? That's not... He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, frustration cracking his composure. I need a wife, Clara. My family is pressing me. The estate needs an heir. You understand how these things work. I understand perfectly. You need someone manageable to fulfill a role. I'm simply no longer interested in being that person. What are you interested in? This? He gestured at the house, dismissive. Playing nursemaid in a Yorkshire village? You deserve better. I deserve to be valued. That's all I ever wanted. I value you. No. You value what I represent. There's a difference. Clara met his eyes. Go home, Adrian. Find someone who wants what you're offering. I don't. You're making a mistake. Then it's my mistake to make. Adrian stared at her, clearly struggling with the fact that she wasn't budging. He'd probably expected tears, maybe gratitude at his magnanimous forgiveness. Instead, he got a woman who'd already moved on. "Is there someone else?" he asked suddenly. Clara almost laughed. "That's what you think this is about? Another man?" "Well, is there?" She thought about Ethan, about quiet conversations over tea and shared worry over sick children, about being seen, actually seen for the first time in her life. "That's none of your business," she said. "So there is." "Goodbye, Adrian." This time when she closed the door, he didn't stop her. Clara stood in the hallway, heart pounding, and waited for regret. It didn't come. Instead, she felt free. Alice appeared at the top of the stairs. "Was that the Duke you ran away from? You were eavesdropping." "Obviously. He seemed awful." "He wasn't awful. He was just wrong. For me." Alice came down slowly. "Are you going back with him?" "Absolutely not." "Good." Alice hugged her quickly, surprisingly fierce. "I like you here." Clara hugged her back, feeling something warm and real settle in her chest. When Ethan came home that evening, she told him everything: the engagement, the overheard conversation, Adrian's visit. He listened without interrupting. "He called this place playing nursemaid," Clara finished, "as if caring for your children and managing your house was somehow beneath me." "Is it?" Ethan asked quietly. "No. It's the first real thing I've done in my entire life." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'm glad you're here." "So am I." They sat in comfortable silence, and Clara realized she meant it completely. Week 7 brought snow. Early for the season, but Yorkshire didn't care about timing. The house, which had seemed charming in autumn, revealed its weaknesses: drafty windows, a chimney that smoked, a roof that leaked in one corner of Alice's room. Clara and Ethan spent a Sunday afternoon stuffing rags in window frames while the children built a snowman outside. "This house is falling apart," Ethan muttered, fighting with a particularly stubborn gap. "It's structurally sound, just neglected." Helen wanted to fix it up, add a proper study, expand the kitchen. "We were saving for it when she got sick." His hand stilled. "Then there was the medical bills and the funeral, and I just stopped thinking about it." Clara worked beside him, quiet, letting him talk. "Sometimes I feel like I'm just treading water," he continued, "keeping us afloat but not actually moving forward. Like I'm stuck." "You're not stuck. You're surviving. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes." Clara pressed rags into the last gap. "Surviving means you're still here, still trying. That's not nothing." Ethan looked at her. "Is that what you're doing? Surviving?" "I was. Now I think I'm actually living." She tested the window. "There. That should help with the draft." They went downstairs to find James and Alice had tracked snow through the entire kitchen. "Sorry," James said, not sounding sorry at all. Clara looked at the muddy footprints, the melting snow, the chaos. And she laughed. Ethan stared at her. "Are you all right?" "I'm perfect." She grabbed a towel. "Come on, you two. Clean up your mess." Later, after the children were in bed, Ethan found her in the kitchen. "You laughed today," he said. "Is that unusual?" "For you?" "Yes. You smile, you're pleasant, but actual laughter." He leaned against the counter. "It was nice, hearing you happy." Clara dried the last dish. "I am happy. Strangely, ridiculously happy. Even with the leaking roof and the drafted windows and the chaos? Especially with those things." She set the dish down. "Because they're real. This is real, not some performed version of life." Ethan crossed the kitchen, stopping close enough that Clara could smell snow and wood smoke on his clothes. "You're remarkable," he said quietly. "I'm really not. You walked away from a duke, built a new life from nothing, made my children love you and my house function, and—" He stopped. "Sorry. I'm overstepping." "Are you?" "Probably." They stood there, the space between them charged with something Clara didn't want to name. Then James yelled from upstairs, "Alice won't give me back my book," and the moment broke. Ethan sighed. Duty calls. "Welcome to parenting." He headed for the stairs, then paused. "Clara?" "Yes?" "I'm glad you chose this, chose us." After he'd gone, Clara stood in the quiet kitchen and let herself feel everything she'd been avoiding. She was falling for him, not the way she'd fallen for Adrian, carefully, strategically, with full awareness of what the match would provide. This was different, messier, real, terrifying, and she had absolutely no idea what to do about it. Week 8, end of November. Clara sat at the kitchen table, calculating expenses. They were tight this month. Ethan's survey work had been delayed by weather, and winter meant higher costs for everything. She was so focused that she didn't hear him come in until he dropped a heavy purse on the table. "What's this?" she asked. "Payment. Lord Ashford's survey finally came through, double what I expected." Clara opened the purse, £60. More than they'd seen in months. "Ethan, this is enough to fix the roof, replace those windows, maybe even expand the kitchen like Helen wanted." He sat across from her. "I was thinking, we should do it properly. Make this place feel less like we're just surviving." Clara looked at the money, then at him. "We?" He met her eyes. "You're part of this household, Clara. Your opinion matters." Something warm bloomed in her chest. "Then I think you should fix the roof first. The rest can wait." Practical as always. Someone has to be. He smiled, real and warm. "What would I do without you?" "Burn more soup, probably." His laugh startled them both. They spent the evening planning, repairs needed, costs estimated, priorities set, working together like a team, like partners. Clara filed that thought away too, something to examine when she was alone. December arrived with brutal cold and something Clara hadn't expected, contentment so deep it scared her. She'd rebuilt her life, created value, found purpose. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. And that, she realized, was more than she'd ever hoped for when she walked away from the Duke's estate in the dark. She'd chosen survival, and somehow, impossibly, found herself thriving. Christmas came to Helmsley with frozen ground and a brittle kind of hope. Clara had never paid much attention to the holiday before. At the Duke's estate, it had been another performance, all gilded decorations and strategic guest lists. Here, it meant Alice and James hanging paper chains they'd made themselves and arguing over whether the scraggly pine Ethan had dragged home was charmingly rustic or just sad. "It's perfect," Clara said, surprising herself by meaning it. James looked skeptical. "It's lopsided." So are most perfect things. They decorated it with whatever they could find: ribbons saved from parcels, paper stars, a few glass ornaments that had survived from Helen's time. Alice handled those carefully, reverently. "Mother loved Christmas," she said quietly, hanging a delicate blue sphere. "She'd make everything special, even when we didn't have much." Ethan, standing in the doorway with his coat still on, went very still. Clara caught his eye. He looked gutted. She made a decision. "Alice, why don't you and James finish the tree? I need to speak with your father about the butcher's order." Once they were in the hallway, Ethan leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. "I can't do this," he said. "The decorations, the traditions, it all reminds me she's gone, and I can't give them what she gave them, and I—" "Stop!" Clara's voice was firm. "You're not Helen. You're never going to be Helen, and that's fine." "It doesn't feel fine, because you're trying to replicate something instead of creating something new." She stepped closer. "They don't need their mother's Christmas. They need yours. Different is allowed." "What if different isn't good enough?" "Then it isn't, but at least it's honest," Clara softened. "They know you're trying. That matters more than perfection." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "How do you always know what to say?" "I don't. I'm making this up as I go." "Well, you're good at it." They stood close enough that Clara could feel the cold still clinging to his coat, close enough that if she leaned forward just slightly— "Father," James called, "the star won't stay on top." The moment fractured. Ethan pushed off the wall. "Duty calls." "It usually does." But as he walked away, he touched her hand. Brief, warm, deliberate. Clara stood there, heart hammering, and tried to remember why getting involved with her employer was a terrible idea. Christmas morning arrived with snow and chaos. James woke everyone at dawn, demanding they open the few simple gifts Clara had helped Ethan select. A book for Alice, a wooden puzzle for James, warm scarves for both. "These are perfect," Alice said, wrapping hers around her neck immediately. James was already absorbed in the puzzle. Ethan handed Clara a small package. For you. I don't need... Open it. Inside was a leather-bound journal, good quality, the kind that would last years. For your observations, Ethan said. You're always making notes on scraps of paper. Thought you should have something proper. Clara ran her fingers over the smooth leather. No one had given her something so personal before, so specifically chosen. Thank you, she managed. There's an inscription. She opened the cover in Ethan's careful handwriting, for Clara, who taught us that starting over doesn't mean starting from nothing. Christmas 1845. Something caught in her throat. Too much? Ethan asked, suddenly uncertain. No, it's perfect. They looked at each other across the small parlor, children occupied with their gifts, snow falling outside, and Clara felt the last of her carefully maintained distance start to crumble. Then Alice said, Can we make Mother's gingerbread? Miss Whitmore, the recipe is in the kitchen book, the one with the blue cover. The request hung in the air. Ethan's expression shuddered. Of course, Clara said before he could object. Why don't you show me? The blue book was worn, pages stained and marked. Helen's handwriting filled the margins. Notes, adjustments, little observations. James prefers these with extra molasses. Alice will only eat them if they're perfectly crisp. Clara felt like she was intruding on something sacred. She wrote everything down, Alice explained, oblivious. She said cooking was about remembering what people loved. They made the gingerbread together, following Helen's notes exactly. The kitchen filled with spice and sweetness. Ethan appeared in the doorway, drawn by the smell. He stopped when he saw the blue book. Alice wanted to make them, Clara said quietly. He crossed to the counter, ran his finger along the page. She perfected this recipe the Christmas before she died, made 3 batches testing the spice ratio. It's a good recipe. She was good at everything. His voice cracked slightly. I don't know how to fill that space. You don't fill it, you just keep going around it. Clara pulled the first batch from the oven. And sometimes you make her gingerbread and remember that love doesn't stop just because someone's gone. Ethan looked at her, something raw and grateful in his expression. How did you get so wise? He asked. I'm not wise. I just know what it's like to lose something and have to figure out who you are without it. They ate gingerbread in the parlor, James getting crumbs everywhere, Alice reading her new book, snow falling steadily outside. It wasn't the Christmas Clara had grown up with. No elaborate feast, no formal presents, no performance. It was better. That night, after the children were asleep, Clara and Ethan sat by the fire. She'd brought the journal downstairs, running her hands over it. I meant what I wrote, Ethan said, about not starting from nothing. I know. You've built something here. With us. It matters. Clara looked at him. It matters to me too. The words hung between them, weighted with everything they weren't saying. Ethan leaned forward. Clara, A crash from upstairs. James, nightmare or accident, impossible to tell. Ethan closed his eyes. Of course. I'll go, Clara said. No, I should. Ethan, let me. She found James tangled in his blankets, half awake and disoriented. Sorry, I knocked over the water jug. It's fine. Come on, let's get you sorted. As she helped him resettle, James said sleepily, Are you going to stay forever? Where's this coming from? Alice said you might leave, like Mother did. Clara's heart clenched. Your mother didn't want to leave. I know, but she did anyway. His eyes were too old. People always leave. Not always. Clara pulled the blanket up. I'm not planning on going anywhere. Promise? She shouldn't. Promises were dangerous, breakable things. I promise, she said anyway. James fell back asleep almost immediately. Clara sat there in the dark, realizing she'd just committed to something she had no right to guarantee. When she went back downstairs, Ethan was still by the fire. He all right? He asked. Worried I'm going to leave. Ethan's expression shifted. Are you? No. Even though this wasn't what you planned? Even though you could probably find something better, somewhere easier? This is exactly what I need. Clara sat across from him. I didn't plan it, but that doesn't make it wrong. What are we doing, Clara? The question was quiet but loaded. I don't know, she admitted. What do you want to be doing? Something I probably shouldn't. Why? Because you work for me. Because my children are attached to you. Because if this goes wrong, it doesn't just affect us, it affects them. He ran a hand through his hair. Because I'm terrified of wanting something again and losing it. Clara understood that fear intimately. So we don't do anything, she said. Right. They sat in silence, both knowing they were lying to themselves. January brought bitter cold and the first real test of the fragile thing growing between them. Ethan had been gone for a week on a survey project, longer than usual. Clara managed the house, taught the children, kept everything running. It should have been routine. Then Alice got sick. Not fever sick like James had been. Worse. She started coughing on a Monday, persistent and deep. By Wednesday, she could barely get out of bed. Clara tried everything, steam treatments, herbal teas, rest. Nothing helped. Thursday morning, Alice coughed up blood. Clara stood in the girls' room looking at the red-stained cloth and felt ice run through her veins. Consumption. The same thing that killed Helen. Don't tell Father, Alice wheezed. He'll panic. He needs to know. Not yet. It might just be a bad cough. But they both knew better. Clara made a decision she had no authority to make. She sent for Dr. Matthews. He came within the hour, examined Alice thoroughly, and confirmed Clara's worst fear. Early stages, he said in the hallway, voice low. Could be consumption, could be severe bronchitis. Won't know for certain for a few weeks. What do I do? Keep her warm, no exertion, watch for fever, and pray it's not what took her mother. After he left, Clara sat in the kitchen and let herself shake. She'd promised James she wouldn't leave. She'd promised herself she could handle this. But if Alice had consumption, if Clara had to watch this child die the way Helen had. Miss Whitmore? James stood in the doorway, small and scared. Clara pulled herself together. Yes? Is Alice going to die like Mother? The question punched through her chest. No, she said firmly. We're going to fight this. Together. She sent word to Ethan. Urgent, but not panicked. He needed to know, but she didn't want him abandoning his work unnecessarily. He arrived 12 hours later, having ridden through the night. Where is she? He demanded, snow still on his shoulders. Upstairs. Resting. Clara caught his arm. Ethan, before you go up, it might not be consumption. Dr. Matthews said it could be bronchitis. And if it's not, then we deal with it. But right now she needs you calm, not terrified. He looked at her desperate. I can't lose her too. You won't. I won't let you. It was an impossible promise. Clara made it anyway. They took shifts sitting with Alice. Clara during the day, teaching lessons from the bedside, reading to her. Ethan at night, watching her breathe like he could will her lungs to work properly. A week passed, then 2. Alice didn't get worse, but she didn't get better either. The house took on a strained quality. James got quiet, retreating into himself. Ethan stopped sleeping properly. Clara held everything together through sheer force of will. She was in the kitchen one night preparing another steam treatment when Ethan came downstairs. She's asleep, he said. Breathing easier tonight. That's good. Clara, he crossed to her. I need to say something. Now? Especially now. He took her hands and Clara felt her heart stutter. If Alice does have what Helen had, if we're about to go through that again, I need you to know that having you here makes it bearable. That you've become... He stopped. You matter, to all of us. To me. Clara should step back, maintain boundaries, remember her position. Instead, she said, you matter to me too. Ethan's grip tightened. If circumstances were different, they're not. I know, but I need you to know that I... Alice's cough echoed from upstairs, sharp and painful. They broke apart. Ethan headed for the stairs. Clara stayed in the kitchen, hands shaking, and tried to ignore the fact that she'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. The next morning, Dr. Matthews returned. He examined Alice again, more thoroughly. Clara and Ethan waited in the hallway, not touching but standing close enough to feel each other's tension. Finally, Matthews emerged. It's not consumption. The relief was so intense Clara had to lean against the wall. It's chronic bronchitis aggravated by the cold. Serious but manageable. She'll need rest, warmth, and time, but she's not dying. Ethan actually laughed, broken and grateful. You're certain? As certain as I can be. The pattern's wrong for consumption. She's already starting to improve. After he left, Ethan turned to Clara and pulled her into a hug so tight she could barely breathe. Thank you, he said into her hair, for keeping her alive, for keeping me sane, for everything. Clara let herself hold him back, just for a moment. Then she stepped away before she couldn't. February arrived with Alice on the mend, and everything changed. It started small. Ethan finding reasons to brush past Clara in the kitchen. Clara volunteering to help with his surveying notes, their hands touching over maps. Conversations that went longer than necessary, charged with things they weren't saying. The children noticed. Father smiles more when you're around, Alice observed one afternoon while practicing her penmanship. He's relieved you're better. No, it's different. Alice looked up, unnervingly perceptive. He looks at you the way he used to look at Mother. Clara's hand stilled on the book she was holding. Alice, I'm not upset. Mother would want him to be happy. She went back to her writing. And you make him happy. That's good. The simplicity of it nearly broke Clara's heart. That night, after dinner, Ethan asked Clara to walk with him. It's freezing, she pointed out. I know. Come anyway. They walked to the edge of the property, snow crunching under their feet. The moon was bright enough to see by. We need to talk about what's happening, Ethan said. Do we? Yes. He stopped, turned to face her. Because I can't keep pretending I don't feel this, and I don't think you can either. Clara's breath fogged in the cold air. Ethan, I work for you. I live in your house. I care for your children. It's not appropriate. I don't care about appropriate. You should. We both should. Why? Give me one good reason. Because if this goes wrong, I lose everything. The words burst out before she could stop them. My position, my home, the children I've come to love, all of it. And you'd be fine. You'd find another housekeeper, but I'd be ruined. Again. Ethan's expression cracked open. You think I'd throw you out? I think you'd have to, for propriety, for the children's sake. Then marry me. Clara's heart stopped. What? Marry me. Make this proper, legal, protected. He stepped closer. I'm in love with you, Clara. I didn't plan it. Didn't want it, honestly. But it happened anyway, and I'm done fighting it. You don't love me. You love that I fixed your house and taught your children and made things easier. I love that you left a duke because he called you manageable. I love that you laugh at James's terrible jokes and challenge Alice's assumptions. I love the way you organize my accounts and burn dinner sometimes and handle village gossips like you're facing down armies. His voice dropped. I love that you're brave enough to start over and stubborn enough to make it work. And I know this is fast and complicated and probably terrifying for you, but I needed to say it. Clara couldn't breathe. I can't. You can. You walked away from security once. You can walk toward it now. That's different. How? Because this time I have something to lose. The admission hung in the frozen air. Ethan's expression softened. You think I don't? I'm offering you my life, Clara, my children, my broken house, and chaotic existence. That's not nothing. I know it's not. That's what scares me. They stood in the snow, close enough to touch, but not touching, and Clara felt the weight of the decision pressing down. I need time, she said finally. Take it. Ethan stepped back, but know that I'm not going anywhere. And neither is this. They walked back in silence. At the door, Clara paused. If I say yes, and I'm not saying I am, but if I did, what happens to my position? You'd stop being the housekeeper and start being my wife. Alice and James's mother, if you'll have that too. They already had a mother, and they'll never forget her, but that doesn't mean there's no room for you. He touched her face, gentle. Love isn't finite, Clara. It expands. That night, Clara lay in her attic room and tried to think rationally. This was insane. She'd known Ethan for 3 months. She'd sworn off marriage entirely. She had no business considering this. But then she thought about Alice teaching her about plants in the garden, James falling asleep with his head on her shoulder, Ethan's quiet strength and terrible cooking, and the way he looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd stopped asking. She thought about the life she'd built here, small and imperfect and entirely her own. And she thought about what she'd told Alice once, that perfect things were usually lopsided. Maybe that applied to love too. The next morning, Clara found Ethan in his study. "I need conditions," she said without preamble. He looked up, hope flickering across his face. "I'm listening." "I won't be ornamental. I'll continue managing the house and teaching the children because that matters to me." "Agreed." "And I need you to understand that I'm not Helen. I won't try to be her, and you can't expect me to replace her." "I don't want you to replace her. I want you to be you." Clara took a breath. "And if this fails, if we fail, I need to know I won't be thrown out with nothing, that I'll have security regardless." Ethan stood, crossed to his desk, pulled out paper and ink. "I'll put it in writing, a settlement. If the marriage ends for any reason, you get a stipend, enough to live independently. You do that? I'd do anything to make you feel safe." Clara watched him write it out, careful and legal. Protection she'd never thought to ask for from Adrian. "Anything else?" Ethan asked. "One more thing." She met his eyes. "I need you to know that I'm damaged. I'm scared and I don't know how to do this and I'll probably mess it up." "Then we'll mess it up together." He held out the settlement. "These terms acceptable?" Clara read it. Fair, generous, honest, like him. "Yes," she said. "So that's a yes to marriage?" "That's a yes to trying." Ethan crossed the room in 3 strides and kissed her. Clara had been kissed before, proper performative kisses designed to seal engagements. This was nothing like those. This was real and messy and made her forget why she'd been scared. When they broke apart, Ethan was smiling. "We should tell the children." "They probably already know. Alice has been watching us like a hawk." "Still, it should be official." They gathered Alice and James in the parlor. Clara's heart was hammering. "We have something to tell you," Ethan started. "You're getting married," Alice interrupted. "Finally." Ethan blinked. "How did you—" "You're not subtle, Father." She looked at Clara. "Does this mean you're staying forever now?" "Yes." "Good." Alice went back to her book like the matter was settled. James was quieter. "Are you going to be our mother?" Clara knelt in front of him. "I'll never replace your mother, but if you'll let me, I'd like to be someone who loves you that way. Is that all right?" James thought about it seriously, then nodded. "Will you still teach me mathematics?" "Of course." "Then I think it's all right." That easily, it was decided. The wedding was planned for March. Small, simple, nothing like the elaborate affair Clara had been preparing for with Adrian. This time, she didn't care about flowers or guest lists or performative elegance. She cared about standing in front of a village priest and choosing this life deliberately. But 2 weeks before the wedding, everything went wrong. A letter arrived, expensive paper, familiar handwriting, Adrian's mother, the Dowager Duchess. "Miss Whitmore, my son has informed me of your current circumstances. While I respect your choices, I must insist we meet. There are matters regarding your father's estate that require discussion. I'll be at the Crown and Anchor on the 15th. Please attend. Duchess Margaret Hale." Clara read it 3 times, dread pooling in her stomach. "What is it?" Ethan asked, seeing her expression. "The past," she said, "coming back." Ethan took the letter from her hands, read it, and his jaw tightened. "You don't have to go." "Yes, I do." "Why?" "You walked away from them. You don't owe them anything." Clara sank into a chair, exhaustion washing over her. "My father's estate. There could be debts I don't know about, legal obligations. If I ignore this and something comes back to, then I'll handle it, whatever it is. This isn't your problem. Clara." He knelt in front of her. "In 2 weeks, we're getting married. That means your problems become my problems. Let me help." She wanted to. Every instinct screamed to let him shoulder this burden, but she'd spent too many years being protected, managed, handled. She'd walked away from that. "I need to face this myself," she said. "But I'd like you to come with me. Not to fight my battles, just to be there." Ethan's expression softened. "I can do that." The 15th arrived cold and gray. Clara dressed carefully, her best dress, which was still modest compared to what she used to wear. She looked respectable, self-possessed. not like someone who'd fled in the night. The Crown and Anchor's private dining room felt too small when the Dowager Duchess walked in. Margaret Hale was exactly as Clara remembered: tall, elegant, expensive. She swept the room with one assessing glance, taking in Clara's simple dress, Ethan's surveyor's clothes, the complete absence of pretension. "Miss Whitmore," her voice was cool. "Thank you for coming." "Your Grace." Clara remained seated, a small rebellion. "This is Ethan Reed, my fiancé." Margaret's eyebrow rose fractionally. "How quaint." Ethan's hand found Clara's under the table. Steady. "You said there were matters regarding my father's estate," Clara said. "What matters?" Margaret settled into her chair with the precision of someone used to commanding rooms. "Your father, as you know, died with considerable debts." "I'm aware. What you may not be aware of is that several creditors have recently come forward claiming additional sums owed. Substantial sums." Clara's stomach dropped. "How substantial?" £3,000. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "That's impossible," Clara said. "My father gambled, yes, but not at that level. He didn't have access to that kind of credit." "Apparently he did, through a private lending arrangement." Margaret pulled papers from her reticule. "These creditors are threatening legal action against his estate, which, as his sole heir, means they're threatening action against you." Clara's hands went cold. £3,000. She'd never see that kind of money in her lifetime. "What do they want?" Ethan asked, voice hard. Margaret's gaze flicked to him, dismissive. "Payment, naturally, or settlement of some kind. And if she can't pay? Then they'll pursue other remedies. Seizure of assets, public disgrace, legal proceedings that would be unpleasant for all involved." Clara felt the walls closing in. "I have nothing. No assets, no money. What exactly do they think they'll seize?" "Your future, perhaps." Margaret's tone was delicate. "A woman marrying a man of means, even modest means, represents an opportunity for settlement." Understanding crashed down. "You want Ethan to pay my father's debts. I want to offer you a solution." "No." Ethan's voice was flat. "Absolutely not." Margaret ignored him, focusing on Clara. "My son made you an offer once. That offer stands. Return to him, complete the marriage as originally planned, and I'll settle these debts personally. All of them." "In exchange for what?" Clara asked. "My compliance? My silence about why I left? In exchange for everyone getting what they need. Adrian gets a suitable wife. You get financial security and social position. These creditors get paid. It's quite tidy. And I get traded like livestock again." Margaret's expression hardened. "You get rescued from circumstances entirely of your own making. Walking away from a duke to play house with a surveyor? That was foolish, Clara. Now reality has come calling." Ethan stood abruptly. "We're done here. Sit down, Mr. Reed. The adults are talking." "The adults can go to hell." He pulled Clara to her feet. "Come on." But Clara didn't move. She was staring at Margaret, pieces clicking together. "These debts," she said slowly. "When did they surface?" "Recently, as I said." "How recently?" "Before or after Adrian came to see me in January." Margaret's pause was microscopic, but Clara caught it. "You manufactured this," Clara breathed. "There are no new debts. Or if there are, you paid someone to create them." "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth. Adrian told you I refused to come back, so you created leverage. Something to force me back into line." Margaret didn't deny it. That was confirmation enough. "You have no proof," she said calmly. "And even if you did, the debts are real now. Legal, enforceable. Whether I orchestrated them or not is irrelevant." Clara felt rage building in her chest, clean and clarifying. "Why? Why go to this trouble? Adrian can find another wife. Someone actually willing." "Because you embarrassed us. You walked away from the Duke of Ashworth like he was some country squire you'd tired of. That kind of insult doesn't go unanswered. So this is revenge. This is correction." Margaret stood, gathering her things. "You have until the end of March to decide. Accept Adrian's proposal, or these creditors will pursue every legal avenue available. And I assure you, they will win." She walked to the door, paused. "For what it's worth, I don't take pleasure in this, but you need to understand your place. Women like us don't get to choose love over duty. We choose survival. After she left, Clara stood frozen. She's bluffing, Ethan said. She has to be. She's not. Clara sank back into the chair. The debts are real. Even if she created them, they're legally binding now. Then we fight them. In court. I'll hire a solicitor. With what money? Court cases take months, maybe years. And even if we win, the scandal alone would destroy us. No one would hire you for survey work if they think you're embroiled in legal troubles. Alice and James would hear the gossip. We'd lose everything. Ethan crouched in front of her. Then what do we do? Clara looked at him, this good, steady man who'd offered her safety and love and a future she'd never expected, who was willing to fight for her even when it wasn't logical. I don't know, she admitted. They walked back to the house in silence. Clara's mind spun through scenarios, all of them bad. If she went back to Adrian, Ethan and the children would survive. They'd find another housekeeper, eventually another wife and mother. They'd be hurt, but they'd recover. If she stayed and fought, they'd all drown together. The math was brutal and clear. At home, Alice took one look at Clara's face and said, "What happened?" "Adult problems," Ethan said. "Nothing for you to worry about." "That means it's bad." James appeared from the kitchen, reading a book. He glanced up, saw the tension, and his expression shuddered. That too careful look Clara had worked so hard to erase. "I'm going upstairs," he said quietly. After the children left, Clara told Ethan everything. The full amount, the timeline, Margaret's ultimatum. He listened without interrupting, his face getting harder with each detail. "We run," he said when she finished. "What?" "We leave. Take the children, go somewhere else. Scotland, Ireland, even America. Start over completely. With what money? Your savings wouldn't get us across England, much less the ocean. Then I'll borrow it, sell the house, and prove Margaret right, that I'm running again?" Clara shook her head. "Besides, debts follow you, especially ones this big. We'd be looking over our shoulders forever." "Better than sending you back to him." Clara wanted to agree. But she'd seen what running looked like now. She'd been doing it for 4 months. Eventually you had to stop and face things. "There might be another option," she said slowly. "I'm listening." "I could negotiate with the creditors directly, find out what they'd actually accept in settlement. Margaret said £3,000, but creditors usually settle for less." "How much less?" "Maybe half. Maybe a third if they're desperate for payment." "That's still £1,000 minimum. I don't have that." Claire's mind was racing. "But I know someone who does." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Who?" "My mother's cousin, Edmund Whitmore. He inherited the family textile business. We're not close, but he has resources and he's always been fair. If I could convince him this is a legitimate investment, you'd be indebted to your family again. I'd be indebted to Edmund specifically, with clear terms, interest, repayment schedule, everything documented." Clara was pacing now, the plan taking shape. "It's not perfect, but it's something other than surrender." Ethan caught her hand, stopping her movement. "And if he says no? Then we consider running. Not going back to Adrian?" "Never going back to Adrian." She met his eyes. "I'd rather be poor and hunted than manageable." He pulled her close, and Clara let herself lean into him, solid, real, worth fighting for. "When do we contact this cousin?" Ethan asked. "I'll write tonight. He's in Manchester. If he responds quickly, we might have an answer before March ends." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was theirs. Clara wrote the letter that night, choosing every word carefully. She explained the situation, omitting Margaret's manipulation, but including the debt amount and the timeline. She proposed repayment terms, 5% interest, paid over 10 years from her portion of household income. It made her vulnerable. Edmund would know exactly how desperate she was, but desperation was better than defeat. The letter went out the next morning. Then came the waiting. Days crawled past. Clara tried to maintain normalcy, lessons with the children, household management, wedding planning that now felt surreal. Alice noticed the tension. "Are you and Father fighting?" "No, just dealing with complicated things." "Is it about money?" Clara looked at her, 9 years old and too perceptive. "Yes." "We don't have very much, do we?" "We have enough, but not enough for whatever this is." Alice set down her book. Mother used to say money problems were the worst kind because they made everything else harder. Your mother was wise. She also said sometimes you had to ask for help, even when you didn't want to. Clara felt something crack in her chest. I'm trying. I know. Alice hugged her, quick and fierce. You're brave, even when you're scared. After she left, Clara sat in the quiet parlor and tried to believe that. A week passed. No response from Edmund. Clara fought rising panic. March was half over. Margaret's deadline loomed. Then, 10 days after sending the letter, a reply arrived. Clara's hand shook as she opened it. Cousin Clara, I received your letter with great interest. The situation you describe is unfortunate, but not insurmountable. I'm willing to provide a loan of £1,000 at the terms you specified, with one condition. I meet your intended husband and assess his character personally. I've learned not to invest in situations I don't understand. I'll be in York on the 24th. Meet me at the Royal Station Hotel at 2 o'clock. Your cousin, Edmund Whitmore. Relief and anxiety warred in Clara's chest. He said yes? Ethan read over her shoulder. Conditionally, he wants to meet you. That's fair. I'd want the same. Ethan, he's going to judge you. Our life. Everything. Let him. I'm not ashamed of who we are. But Clara was terrified. Edmund moved in circles that valued wealth and position. What would he see when he looked at their modest home, their patched-together life? The 24th arrived too fast. Clara dressed in her best again, feeling like she was wearing armor. Ethan wore his good suit, the one he saved for meeting clients. They took the coach to York, a journey that cost more than they should spend but couldn't avoid. The Royal Station Hotel was exactly what Clara expected. Polished, expensive, designed to impress. She felt every eye in the lobby tracking them. Edmund was waiting in the tea room, 40, well-dressed, sharp eyes that missed nothing. He stood when Clara approached. Cousin, he kissed her cheek formally. You look well. Thank you for meeting us. And you must be Mr. Reed. Edmund shook Ethan's hand, assessing. They sat. Tea was ordered. Polite conversation was made about weather and travel. Then Edmund got to business. Clara's letter was sparse on details. I'd like the full story. So Clara told him. Not everything. She left out Margaret's manipulation, but enough. The broken engagement, her position as housekeeper, the upcoming marriage, the debts that had surfaced. Edmund listened without interrupting. When she finished, he turned to Ethan. What do you do, Mr. Reed? Land surveyor. I work for estates throughout Yorkshire. Steady work? Mostly. Weather dependent? Income? Ethan named his annual earnings. Clara saw Edmund's expression. It was half what he probably spent on clothes. And you have 2 children from a previous marriage? Yes. How do you plan to support a wife and 2 children on a surveyor's income while also repaying a £1,000 loan? The question was blunt. Ethan didn't flinch. Carefully. Clara's already improved our household efficiency significantly. We've reduced expenses by nearly 30%. With continued management, we can afford the repayment schedule she proposed. 30%. Edmund looked at Clara. How? Better negotiation with tradesmen, organized accounting, eliminating waste. She pulled out the household ledger she'd brought. Here, see for yourself. Edmund studied it, turning pages. His eyebrows rose. This is exceptional work. Thank you. You did this while also serving as governess? And housekeeper, and general manager. Clara kept her voice level. I'm good at seeing what needs fixing. Edmund closed the ledger. I can see that. He turned back to Ethan. Why marriage? You had a perfectly functional arrangement. Why complicate it? Ethan's jaw tightened. Because I love her, and because she deserves more than being hired help. Love is expensive, Mr. Reed. So is regret. They stared at each other across the tea service. Clara held her breath. Finally, Edmund smiled. Fair point. He pulled papers from his case. I've had my solicitor draw up loan documents. £1,000 at 5% interest, repaid over 10 years in quarterly installments of £33. First payment due June 1846. If you default, I reserve the right to call the full amount immediately. Those are the terms I proposed, Clara said. They are, because they're fair. Edmund pushed the papers across. But I'm adding one clause. If at any point you need to renegotiate, due to illness, emergency, acts of God, you contact me first, before you do anything desperate. Clara's throat tightened. Why are you helping us? Edmund was quiet for a moment. Your father was my uncle. I watched him destroy your family through selfishness and pride, and I watched your mother suffer for it. He met her eyes. You walked away from that legacy, built something better. I respect that. You barely know me. I know you asked for help with clear terms instead of begging for rescue. That tells me everything I need to know. He offered his hand to Ethan. Take care of her. She's worth the trouble. Ethan shook it. I know. They signed the documents right there. Edmund's solicitor witnessed it. Money would be transferred to Ethan's account within 3 days. Walking out of the hotel, Clara felt like she could breathe for the first time in weeks. We did it, she said. You did it. Ethan pulled her close right there on the street. You found a way. Now came the harder part, negotiating with the creditors. Clara sent letters to each one, requesting meetings. 2 responded, a London firm and a local moneylender. The moneylender came first, a weasel-faced man named Garrett, who looked at Clara like she was something he'd scraped off his boot. Miss Whitmore, pleasure. Mr. Garrett, I understand you're claiming my father owed you money. Owes, present tense, £800 with interest. For what? Garrett pulled out papers. Gambling debts from White's Club in London, 1843. Clara studied them. They looked legitimate. Expensive paper, proper signatures. But something felt wrong. My father wasn't a member of White's. Guest privileges. Your former fiancé sponsored him. Of course. Adrian's family setting the trap even then. I'm prepared to offer settlement, Clara said. £400 paid within the month. Garrett laughed. That's half. That's generous considering the debt is 3 years old and you've done nothing to collect until now. Because I was asked to wait. As a favor. To whom? He smiled, oily. That's not your concern. Clara kept her face neutral. 400. Take it or pursue legal action that will cost you more than you'll recover. Garrett studied her. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone softer, easier to break. Then you were misinformed. Clara stood. £400. I'll have my solicitor contact you with payment details. She walked out before he could respond. The London firm was harder. They wanted £2,000, claiming her father had borrowed against future inheritance that never materialized. Clara spent 3 days negotiating through letters and finally got them down to £1,200. Still more than she wanted to pay, but manageable. With Edmund's £1,000 and £400 from household savings Ethan had managed to scrape together, they could cover both debts. Barely. It would leave them with nothing for emergencies. But they'd be free. Clara sent the settlement letters on March 28th, 2 days before Margaret's deadline. Then she wrote one more letter. Your Grace, I'm writing to inform you that the debts you so thoughtfully brought to my attention have been settled directly with the creditors. Your son's proposal is no longer necessary. I wish you well in your future endeavors. Miss Clara Whitmore. She sealed it with more satisfaction than was probably appropriate. The wedding happened on March 30th, the day Margaret's ultimatum expired. It was small. The village priest, Mrs. Talbot, and Tom Bridger as witnesses, Alice and James standing up front in their best clothes. Clara wore a simple blue dress she'd made herself. Ethan wore his good suit. There were no flowers, no elaborate decorations, just 2 people choosing each other deliberately. Do you, Clara Elizabeth Whitmore, take this man? Clara looked at Ethan, solid, steady, real, and said, I do. And do you, Ethan James Reed, take this woman? I do. The priest pronounced them married. Alice cheered. James clapped. Mrs. Talbot wiped her eyes. Outside the church, Ethan kissed his wife properly for the first time. We made it, he said. We did. But Claire knew better than to think this was the end. They had a £1,000 loan to repay, 2 children to raise, a house that still leaked in 3 places, and probably more challenges she couldn't see yet. But they'd face them together. That was worth everything. The wedding breakfast was at the Crown and Anchor, Mrs. Talbot's treat. Simple food, good company, laughter. Clara was cutting the small cake when the door opened. Adrian Hale walked in. The room went silent. He looked at Clara in her simple blue dress, at Ethan beside her, at the children watching with wide eyes. "I heard there was a wedding," he said. Clara set down the knife. "Adrian, what are you doing here?" "Trying to understand." He crossed the room, oblivious to the stares. "My mother said you'd settled the debts somehow, that you'd gone through with this arrangement." "It's not an arrangement, it's a marriage. To a surveyor. To a good man." Adrian's expression cracked. "I could have been good to you. You could have been honest with me. There's a difference." He looked at Ethan. "You know what you're getting? She's stubborn, impractical, impossible to manage." "I know exactly what I'm getting," Ethan said quietly. "A woman brave enough to choose her own life. That's more than you deserved." Adrian flinched. Clara stood, crossing to him. "Why are you really here?" "Because I don't understand. You had everything. Security, position, a future, and you threw it away for—" He gestured around the modest room. This is real. What you offered was a transaction. Marriage is always a transaction. Not this one." Clara softened slightly. "I'm sorry I embarrassed you, but I'm not sorry I left. You would have made me miserable, and I would have done the same to you eventually." "How do you know?" "Because you never once asked me what I wanted. You just assumed I'd want what you offered." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then, "What do you want?" Clara looked back at Ethan, at Alice and James, at the life she'd built from nothing. "This," she said simply. "All of it." Something shifted in Adrian's face, understanding, maybe acceptance. "Then I hope you're happy," he said. And despite everything, he sounded like he meant it. After he left, the celebration resumed. But Clara noticed Ethan was quiet. Later, back at home, she found him in his study. "You all right?" she asked. "He's right, you know, about what you gave up. Ethan, you could have had estates, servants, everything money could buy. Instead, you're stuck here, repaying my debts, raising my children." Clara crossed the room and kissed him, hard. "Stop," she said when they broke apart. "I chose this. Not because it was easy or practical or safe, but because it's mine. We're mine. Even with everything that comes with it. Especially with everything that comes with it." Ethan pulled her close. "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you don't regret it." "I know." They stood together in the quiet study, and Clara felt something settle deep in her chest. She'd left a duke for a surveyor, security for uncertainty, performance for reality, and she'd never been more certain of anything in her life. Later that night, Clara lay in bed, her marriage bed, in Ethan's room, not the attic, and listened to the house settle. Downstairs, a floorboard creaked. The wind rattled a loose shutter. In the next room, James coughed in his sleep. All the small imperfections she'd learned to love. Ethan's arm tightened around her. "Can't sleep. Just thinking." "About?" "How strange life is. 4 months ago, I was planning a completely different future." "Regrets?" "None." She turned to face him. "You?" "Only that I didn't find you sooner." They kissed, slow and real, and Clara felt that certainty again. This was right. Messy, complicated, absolutely right. The next morning brought the bill for the creditor settlements, £1,400 due within the week. Clara and Ethan sat at the kitchen table looking at numbers that didn't quite add up. "We can cover it," Ethan said. "Barely. And then we'll have nothing left. Then we rebuild. Again." Clara was about to respond when someone knocked on the door. She opened it to find a courier holding an envelope. "Mrs. Reed?" The name still startled her. "Yes?" "Letter for you, from London." Clara took it, recognized the handwriting, and felt her stomach drop. Inside was a bank draft for £3,000. And a note. "Clara, consider this a wedding gift. You walked away from my family with nothing. You shouldn't have to pay for that courage. My mother's machinations were unconscionable. The debts were manufactured, as you suspected. I've paid them in full and ensured the creditors will trouble you no more. I failed you. This doesn't fix that, but perhaps it helps. I hope you find happiness." Adrian Clara read it 3 times. Ethan looked over her shoulder. Is this real? I think so. They stared at the bank draft. £3,000, more money than they'd see in years. We can't accept this, Ethan said. Why not? Because it's from him. It's from guilt. There's a difference. Clara set the draft on the table. Besides, he's right. I shouldn't have to pay for walking away from manipulation. But £3,000, we use it wisely. Pay back Edmund early, which saves us interest. Fix the house properly. Put some aside for the children's futures. Build something secure. Ethan was quiet, clearly struggling. It feels like taking his money means he wins somehow, he said finally. He already lost. I married you. Clara touched his face. This is just restitution for what his family tried to do. You're certain? Yes. They deposited the draft the next day, paid Edmund in full with thanks, settled the creditor claims, and still had over £1,000 remaining, more security than Clara had ever known. What do we do with it? Ethan asked. Clara thought about it, about the children's education, the house repairs, future emergencies. We live, she said. Carefully, but we live. And for the first time since leaving the Duke's estate in the dark, Clara felt like she could breathe without calculating the cost. Spring came slowly that year, but when it arrived, it transformed everything. The garden bloomed. The house stopped leaking. Alice's health improved completely. James started laughing again, really laughing, the way children should. And Clara learned what it meant to build a life instead of performing one. She taught the children every morning, managed the household accounts with precision, helped Ethan with his surveying notes, became part of the village in small, real ways. Mrs. Brown still watched her with suspicious eyes, but even she had to admit the Reed household ran better than it had in years. One afternoon in late April, Clara was in the garden with Alice when Tom Bridger's wagon rolled up. Mrs. Reed, he called, got something for you? He handed down a package, heavy, wrapped in oilcloth. Clara opened it and found books, 20 of them, primers, readers, mathematics texts, and a note. For the children, I hear you're an excellent teacher. Edmund Alice's eyes went wide. Are these all for us? They are. Can we start now? Clara laughed. After you finish today's lessons. That night, Ethan found her in the parlor, organizing the books. You're building a library, he observed. I'm building a future. Clara shelved the last volume. These children are going to have opportunities, real ones. Because of you. Because we're giving them what they need. Stability, education, love. Ethan pulled her away from the bookshelf, into his arms. Have I told you lately that I love you? Not in at least 3 hours. Unacceptable. He kissed her forehead. I love you. I love you too. They stood there, surrounded by books and firelight and the quiet sounds of home. And Clara realized something profound. She'd finally stopped running from the past and started building a future. But just as that thought settled, a sharp knock echoed through the house. Clara opened the door to find a man in official-looking clothes, holding documents. Mrs. Clara Reed? Yes. I'm here on behalf of the Crown. There's been a claim filed regarding property rights to this land. You and your husband are required to appear before the magistrate in York next week. Clara's blood went cold. What claim? That's for the magistrate to determine. You'll receive full details at the hearing. He handed her the summons. May 2nd. Don't be late. He left before Clara could ask anything else. She stood in the doorway, summons in hand, and felt the ground shift beneath her feet. They'd barely caught their breath, and already the next threat was arriving. Ethan took the summons from her hands, read it twice, and his face went dark. Property rights? This land has been in my family for 30 years. Who would challenge that? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. He was out the door before Clara could stop him, heading toward the village records office. She followed, leaving Alice in charge of James with instructions to stay inside. The records clerk was a hunched man named Perkins, who'd worked in the office since before Clara was born. He looked up when Ethan slammed through the door. Mr. Reed, what can I... Who filed a claim against my property? Perkins blinked. I'm not at liberty to... Show me the filing, now. Something in Ethan's voice made the clerk move. He He pulled a ledger, flipped pages, ran his finger down entries. Here, filed 3 days ago by... He squinted. Ashford Holdings, Limited. Clara felt ice run through her veins. Which Ashford? Doesn't specify, just the company name. Ethan's jaw was stone. What's the basis of the claim? Says here the land was originally part of the Ashford Estate Holdings, separated improperly in 1815 without proper documentation. They're seeking reversion to original ownership. That's insane. My father bought this land legally. We have the deed. They're claiming the deed was issued in error, that the land was never the seller's to sell. Perkins looked uncomfortable. It's a complicated legal argument. That's why it's going to magistrate. Clara's mind raced. Ashford. The Duke's family name. But which one? Adrian's family in Durham or the North Yorkshire Ashfords that Ethan worked for? Which estate? She asked. Durham or Yorkshire? Perkins checked again. Durham. Adrian's family. Clara felt rage build in her chest, clean and hot. When was this claim filed? Exact date? April 23rd. 2 days after their wedding. 2 days after Adrian's supposed gesture of goodwill. That bastard, Ethan said quietly. No. Clara shook her head. Not Adrian. His mother. It made perfect sense. Margaret had lost the debt manipulation, so she'd found another pressure point, Ethan's land, his livelihood, his children's inheritance. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about punishing Clara for refusing to stay in her assigned place. What do we do? Ethan asked. We fight. But as they walked back home, Clara's certainty wavered. Fighting a duchess in court? With what resources? What legal expertise? They'd spent Adrian's money settling the debts. They had savings now, yes, but hiring a solicitor to fight a noble family would drain that fast. And if they lost, they'd lose everything. The house, the land, the children's home. That night, Clara lay awake while Ethan slept fitfully beside her. She ran through scenarios, calculations, possibilities. They couldn't afford to fight this properly, but they also couldn't afford to lose. There had to be another way. By morning, she had the skeleton of a plan. Risky, unconventional, probably foolish. But it was something. We're going to York early, she told Ethan over breakfast. Before the hearing. Why? Because I need to research, and you need to find every piece of documentation you have about this property. Original deed, transfer papers, tax records, everything. Clara, what are you thinking? That Margaret is counting on us being too intimidated to fight back properly, so we're going to do exactly what she doesn't expect. The trip to York took half a day. Clara left Alice and James with Mrs. Talbot, who'd agreed to watch them despite her usual suspicions, probably because even she could see the threat was real. In York, Clara headed straight for the county records office while Ethan gathered their property documents. She spent 6 hours combing through land transfers, title records, and estate maps. Her eyes ached, her back screamed, but she kept going. Because she found something. The land Ethan's father had purchased in 1815 had indeed been part of the Ashford estate originally, but the separation hadn't been improper. It had been a legal sale to settle gambling debts. The Duke at the time, Adrian's grandfather, had lost badly to a merchant named William Carr. Instead of paying in cash, he'd sold off a section of land at the estate's edge. Carr had then sold that land to Ethan's father 5 years later. All perfectly legal, all properly documented. But here's what made Clara's pulse quicken. The current claim stated the land had been separated improperly without documentation. That was a lie. The documentation existed. She was holding it, which meant either Margaret didn't know about these records or she was counting on Ethan not finding them. Clara made copies of everything. It cost 2 shillings she didn't want to spend, but she paid it. When she met Ethan outside, she was smiling. You found something, he said. I found everything. She showed him the records, watched his expression shift from confusion to understanding to fierce hope. This proves the sale was legal, he said. It proves more than that. It proves their claim is false, possibly knowingly false. Clara gathered the papers carefully. If we can show the magistrate that the Ashford family is filing fraudulent claims, this case gets thrown out, and possibly brings consequences for them. You think Margaret would risk that? I think she assumed we'd be too scared or ignorant to dig this deep, that we'd settle or run. Clara met his eyes. She underestimated us. They spent the next 2 days preparing. Clara organized every document, created a timeline, wrote out their argument in clear, precise language. Ethan watched her work with something like awe. "You should have been a solicitor," he said. "Women can't be solicitors." "Then the law is stupid." Clara smiled despite the tension. No argument there. The hearing was set for May 2nd at 2 o'clock. They arrived an hour early. The magistrate's chambers were intimidating. Dark wood, serious faces, the weight of authority in every corner. Clara felt her courage waver. Then she saw Margaret Hale sitting on the opposite side, perfectly composed, and the anger came roaring back. Margaret saw her and smiled, polite, poisonous. Clara didn't smile back. The magistrate was a man named Thornton, 60-something, with tired eyes and no patience for nonsense. He called the session to order. Ashford Holdings versus Reed, property dispute regarding land parcel 447 in Helmsley. Lady Hale, your representative may proceed. Margaret's solicitor stood. Expensive suit, practiced confidence. He laid out the claim smoothly. The land had been improperly separated from the Ashford estate in 1815. No proper documentation existed, therefore it should revert to rightful ownership. He made it sound reasonable, inevitable. When he finished, Thornton turned to Ethan. "Mr. Reed, your response?" Ethan stood, but Clara touched his arm. "May I speak, Your Honor? I've prepared our documentation." Thornton's eyebrows rose. "You're representing yourselves?" "We are." "Unusual, but permitted. Proceed." Clara stood, papers in hand, and felt every eye in the room on her. "Your Honor, the claim that proper documentation doesn't exist is false. I have here the original sale record from 1815, transferring this land from Duke Henry Ashford to William Carr in settlement of gambling debts. Sum, £800. Properly witnessed and recorded with the county." She handed the document to the clerk. "I also have the subsequent sale from William Carr to Thomas Reed in 1820 for £600. Also properly documented. Both sales were legal, witnessed, and recorded in accordance with the laws of the time." Thornton examined the documents. His expression shifted. Margaret's solicitor stood quickly. "Your Honor, these records could be forgeries." "They're not," Clara interrupted. "They're official county records, sealed and dated. Your office can verify them." She turned to the solicitor. "Unless you're suggesting the county has been maintaining forged documents for 30 years? Silence. Thornton looked at Margaret. "Lady Hale, did you know these records existed?" "I was assured by my researchers that proper documentation was lacking," Margaret said smoothly. "Then your researchers were incompetent or dishonest." Thornton's voice was hard. "These documents clearly establish legal transfer of ownership, twice." "Your Honor, if I may—" The solicitor tried again. "You may not." Thornton set the papers down. "This claim is baseless. Worse, it appears to have been filed with deliberate disregard for easily accessible public records. I'm dismissing it with prejudice." Clara's knees nearly gave out. "Furthermore," Thornton continued, "I'm requiring Ashford Holdings to pay Mr. Reed's costs associated with this hearing, and I'm making a formal note that frivolous claims from this entity will not be tolerated in future." Margaret's composure cracked, just for a second, but Clara saw it. Hearing dismissed. Outside the chambers, Ethan pulled Clara into his arms. "You did it. We did it." "No, that was all you. The research, the documents, the argument." He pulled back to look at her. "You were brilliant." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "I was terrified." "You didn't show it." Margaret emerged from the chambers, her solicitor trailing behind, looking furious. She saw Clara and stopped. For a long moment they stared at each other. Then Margaret crossed the hallway. Clara tensed, but Ethan's hand on her back kept her steady. "That was well done," Margaret said quietly. Clara hadn't expected that. "Thank you. I underestimated you. Again." Something flickered across Margaret's face. Respect, maybe. "My son told me I was making a mistake, pursuing this. He was right." "Why did you do it then?" "Because I don't like losing." Margaret's smile was thin. "But I also know when I'm beaten. You won't hear from us again." "How do I know that?" "Because continued harassment would be beneath our dignity." She straightened her gloves. You've made your point, Miss Witt, Mrs. Reed. You're not manageable. You're not frightened. And you're not going away. No, I'm not. Margaret nodded once, then walked away, her solicitor scrambling to keep up. Clara watched her go and felt something release in her chest. Not forgiveness, but closure. The ride back to Helmsley was quiet. Clara kept expecting to feel triumphant, but mostly she felt exhausted. You all right? Ethan asked. I keep thinking about what she said, about not liking to lose. So? So I won, but it doesn't feel like winning. It feels like... She searched for words. Like I survived. Again. Maybe that's what winning looks like for us. Not triumph, just survival that leads to the next day. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. That's depressing. Or realistic. When they got home, Alice and James were waiting on the porch. Alice took one look at their faces and grinned. You won. We did. James tackled Ethan in a hug. Does that mean we get to stay? We get to stay. That night, the village threw together an impromptu celebration at the Crown and Anchor. Word had spread fast. The Reeds had faced down a duchess and won. Clara found herself surrounded by people she barely knew, all wanting to congratulate her. Tom Bridger raised his glass. To Clara Reed, smartest woman in Yorkshire. Hear, hear, chorused the room. Clara felt her face heat. She wasn't used to this, public acknowledgement, genuine admiration. Mrs. Brown appeared at her elbow. Clara braced for criticism. Instead, the older woman said, I misjudged you. I'm sorry? When you first arrived, I thought you were running from scandal, hiding something shameful. Mrs. Brown's expression was complicated. But you were running towards something, building something. I should have seen that. Clara didn't know what to say. The village needs more women like you, Mrs. Brown continued. Ones who don't just accept what they're given. Thank you. Don't let it go to your head. But she was almost smiling. Later, walking home under stars, Ethan said, You've become part of this place. I have, haven't I? They respect you, all of them. Clara thought about that. Respect. Not because of who she'd been born as or who she'd married, but because of what she'd done, what she'd built. I like it here, she said. Really like it. Is that strange? Not strange, just different from what you expected. Everything's different from what I expected. They reached home. Inside, Alice and James were already asleep. Mrs. Talbot had handled bedtime. Clara and Ethan stood in the quiet kitchen, just breathing. What now? He asked. Now we live. Actually live. Without looking over our shoulders. Think we can do that? I think we can try. They went to bed, and for the first time in months, Clara slept without nightmares. The next weeks brought something Clara hadn't experienced before. Normalcy. Real, sustained, boring normalcy. She taught the children, managed the house, helped Ethan with his work. The days fell into rhythm. It should have been tedious. Instead, it felt like peace. Alice turned 10 in late May. They celebrated with cake and presents, a new book set that Clara had saved for, purchased with money that was actually theirs to spend. This is the best birthday, Alice declared. Better than any I remember. Better than when your mother made you that dollhouse? Ethan asked gently. Alice considered seriously. Different, but still best. Clara's throat tightened. That night, Ethan found her in Helen's old dressing room. She'd been avoiding it since moving in. It felt like trespassing, but tonight she'd finally opened the door. Helen's clothes still hung there. Her jewelry box sat on the vanity. A half-finished embroidery project lay draped over a chair. I should have cleared this out, Ethan said from the doorway. Why didn't you? Couldn't. It felt like erasing her. Clara touched one of the dresses. Good quality, well made. What do you want to do with it? I don't know. What do you think? I think... Clara chose her words carefully. I think keeping it like a shrine doesn't honor her. It just freezes her in time. What would honor her? Using it. Giving her things to people who need them. Keeping what matters and letting go of what doesn't. She turned to face him. But it's your choice. She was your wife. Ethan was quiet for a long time, then... She'd like you. Helen, she'd like how practical you are. How you don't let things stay broken. You think so? I know so. He crossed to the wardrobe, pulled out a blue shawl. This was her favorite. Would you wear it? I'd like to see it used, not hidden away. Clara took it, soft wool against her fingers. Are you sure? Yes. She wrapped it around her shoulders. It fit perfectly. Over the next week, they sorted through Helen's things together. Some went to the church for families in need. Some stayed, the important pieces, the memories that mattered. The embroidery project, Clara finished. It was a garden scene, flowers and birds. She hung it in the parlor. Alice saw it and cried, good tears. Mother would love that it's finished. I hope so. Slowly the house stopped being Helen's house with Clara living in it. It became their house. All of them. June brought Ethan's first loan payment to Edmund. £33, carefully counted and sent with a note of thanks. Edmund wrote back, Cousin Clara, payment received with appreciation. I'm pleased to see you thriving. The investment appears to have been sound. Your success is noted and admired. Edmund Clara pinned the letter to the kitchen board. Proof that they were doing this, actually building something sustainable. But sustainability required more than just surviving. It required growth. One evening, Clara was reviewing their finances when she noticed something. Ethan, how much does Lord Ashford pay you for survey work? North Yorkshire Ashford, £15 per project usually. And how long does each project take? Week to 10 days. Clara did the math. You're underpaid, significantly. That's the going rate. For basic surveys, maybe. But you're doing complex estate mapping. That should be £20 to £25. I can't just demand more money. Why not? You have skills, experience, good reputation. Clara pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. What if you stopped being an employee and became a consultant? What's the difference? Control. You set your rates, choose your clients, build your own business instead of being hired help. Ethan stared at her. That's risky. So was marrying me. You survived that. He laughed. Fair point. They spent the evening planning. Clara calculated costs, projected income, identified potential clients. Ethan listed his skills, his equipment, his competitive advantages. By midnight, they had a business plan. Reed Surveying Services, Clara said. Professional, established, competent. You really think this could work? I think you're good at what you do, and people should pay appropriately for that. She met his eyes. And I think we've learned that taking risks on ourselves usually works out. 2 weeks later, Ethan sent letters to 5 potential clients. 3 responded. One was Lord Ashford of North Yorkshire. His reply was curt. Reed, your previous rate was satisfactory. I see no reason to change arrangements. Ashford. Clara read it and smiled. He's testing you, wants to see if you'll fold. What do I say? That you're no longer available at previous rates, but you appreciate his past business and would be happy to discuss new terms. That sounds like telling him to shove it. Politely, yes. Ethan sent the letter. A week later, Lord Ashford responded, Reed, your terms are acceptable. Begin the Western Border Survey next month. Ashford Ethan stared at the letter. He agreed. Of course he did. You're the best surveyor in the region. He knows it. I got a 30% raise by just asking. You got a 30% raise by knowing your worth. The other 2 clients also agreed to his new rates. Suddenly, their income had increased by nearly a third. That night, Ethan pulled Clara into the kitchen and kissed her thoroughly. What was that for? She asked. For seeing things I don't see. For pushing me when I need pushing. For being the smartest person I know. I'm not. You are. Accept it. Clara smiled against his mouth. Fine, I'm brilliant. Now what? Now we celebrate. They opened a bottle of wine they'd been saving, sat in the garden while the children played, watched the sun set over land that was actually, legally, permanently theirs. We did it, Ethan said. Really did it. Built something stable. We did. So what's next? Clara thought about it. 6 months ago, she'd been running. 3 months ago, she'd been surviving. Now? Now we grow, she said. Business, family, future, all of it. More children? Ethan asked carefully. Clara hadn't let herself think about that. She'd been so focused on surviving that planning for more seemed impossible. But now? Maybe, she said, Someday. No rush. Good. Because I'm still figuring out how to be a wife and mother to the two we have. You're doing fine. I'm doing adequately. Ethan laughed. There's that word again. I'm reclaiming it. Adequate can be enough. They sat in comfortable silence, and Clara felt something she'd never expected to feel. Contentment without asterisks. Not perfect, but real. July brought a surprise visitor. Clara was teaching Alice mathematics when Mrs. Talbot appeared at the door. Someone here to see you. Says it's important. Clara went downstairs to find Edmund Whitmore in her parlor, looking around with frank interest. Edmund, I wasn't expecting you. I was in the area. Thought I'd stop by. He smiled. See how my investment is progressing? Clara showed him around, the organized house, the children's lessons, the garden they'd expanded. Edmund asked questions, made observations, clearly assessing. Finally, in the kitchen over tea, he said, You've done well. Better than I anticipated. Thank you. I'm opening a new textile mill in Leeds. I need someone to manage the business side, accounts, organization, efficiency. He leaned forward. I'd like to hire you. Clara nearly dropped her cup. What? You have skills most men would kill for. Organizational ability, financial acumen, the kind of practical intelligence that translates into profit. He named a salary that made Clara's head spin. Think about it. I can't. I have responsibilities here. The children, the house. Bring them. I'd provide housing, education for the children. Your husband could continue his surveying work from Leeds. Larger client base, better opportunities. It was a generous offer. Extraordinary, really. Clara should have been tempted. Instead, she felt nothing, just a clear, calm certainty. I appreciate the offer, she said. Genuinely, but no. Why not? Because this is my life now. Not a stepping stone to something else. This. She gestured around the modest kitchen. These people, this place, this work, it matters to me. Edmund studied her. You're turning down financial security and advancement to stay in a village where you clean your own house and teach children their letters. Yes. Most people would call that foolish. Most people haven't learned the difference between having everything and having what matters. Edmund was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, genuine and warm. Fair enough, but the offer stands if you change your mind. After he left, Ethan said, You didn't even hesitate. Should I have? Most people would have at least considered it. Clara thought about the life Edmund offered. Comfort, status, financial security beyond anything she had now. All the things she'd once thought she wanted. I did consider it, she said, for about 5 seconds. Then I remembered why I left the first version of that life. And I like this better. That evening, as Clara tucked James into bed, he said, Alice said a man wanted to take us away. Not take. Offer us a different life. Are we going? No? Good. I like it here. He yawned. You make good soup now, better than father's. Clara laughed. High praise. Miss Whitmore, Mother. He stumbled over the word, testing it. Clara's heart clenched. Yes? Do you ever miss being fancy? Sometimes, but not enough to go back. Why not? Because fancy doesn't mean happy, and I'd rather be happy. James considered this seriously, then nodded. That makes sense. After he fell asleep, Clara sat in the quiet house and realized something profound. She'd stopped running, not because she'd found safety, but because she'd found purpose, and that made all the difference. August arrived with heat and harvest, and the kind of bone-deep satisfaction Clara had never known existed. She'd built this life, not inherited it, not been given it, built it, piece by piece, from nothing. And it was hers. One afternoon, she and Ethan were working in the garden. Tomatoes needed staking, when Alice came running. There's a woman at the door. She looks important. Clara wiped dirt from her hands and went inside. The woman waiting was young, maybe 25, well-dressed, but nervous. She clutched a newspaper. Mrs. Reed? Yes? I'm Sarah Harding. I read about you in the paper, about how you fought the Duchess and won. She thrust the newspaper forward. Clara hadn't known they'd been written about. I need help. My father died and left debts, and the creditors are threatening, and I don't know what to do, and everyone says I should just marry this man who offered to settle everything, but I don't want to, and... Slow down, Clara said gently. Come sit. She made tea while Sarah explained. It was a familiar story. Family debt, predatory offers, limited options. Clara listened, then asked questions about amounts, terms, assets. Finally, she said, "You have options. You just haven't seen them yet." She spent 2 hours with Sarah laying out alternatives, negotiation strategies, legal protections, ways to buy time and leverage. When Sarah left, she was crying but smiling. "Thank you. I didn't know I could fight. Most people don't until they have to." After she'd gone, Ethan said, "You just gave her everything you learned, for free." "Should I have charged her?" "No, just observing." He kissed her forehead. "You're becoming something." "What?" "Someone people come to when they need help. Not because you're wealthy or connected, because you're brave and smart, and you actually know how to fix things." Clara thought about that, about Sarah's desperate hope, about her own journey from performative duchess to be to this, a woman in a garden with dirt under her nails and actual solutions to actual problems. "Is that enough?" she asked. "Just helping where I can?" "Clara," Ethan turned her to face him. "You've built a business for me, saved our home twice, taught our children, transformed this house, and now you're helping other women find their own strength." He touched her face. "That's not just anything. That's everything." That night, Clara sat down and wrote a letter to Margaret Hale. Not to gloat, not to accuse. Just to say one thing: "Lady Margaret, thank you for underestimating me. It gave me permission to prove you wrong." Clara read. She never sent it, but writing it felt like closing a door that had been left open too long. September came with cooler air, and the anniversary of the day Clara had walked away. 1 year. 365 days since she'd heard Adrian call her manageable and decided she'd rather have nothing than that. She stood in her garden, expanded now, productive, feeding her family, and tried to remember who she'd been then. That woman felt like a stranger. Thinking deep thoughts? Ethan appeared with 2 cups of tea. Thinking about how much changes in a year. Regrets? Not even one. They sat on the garden bench, watching Alice teach James how to identify plants. The children's laughter carried on the wind. "I love this," Clara said quietly. "All of it, even the hard parts. Even the almost losing everything parts. Especially those, they showed me what I'm capable of." Ethan pulled her close. "You're capable of anything. We're capable of anything." "True." They sat in comfortable silence, and Clara felt the weight of the past year settle into something solid. She'd walked away from security and found strength. She'd traded status for purpose. She'd lost everything society said mattered and gained everything that actually did. And somewhere along the way, she'd stopped being the woman who needed rescuing and become the woman others came to for help. That was worth more than any title. Winter arrived early that year, bringing snow and something Clara hadn't anticipated. Opportunity disguised as crisis. Mrs. Harding's dress shop in the village had been struggling for months. The seamstress was skilled but terrible with numbers, and by December she was 3 months behind on rent, facing eviction. She came to Clara's door on a freezing Tuesday morning, desperate. "Everyone says you're good with money, with organizing things." Mrs. Harding's hands shook. "I don't know what to do. I can sew anything, but the books, I just can't make sense of them." Clara invited her in, made tea, and looked at the accounts. They were a disaster. Not from lack of income, Mrs. Harding had plenty of customers, but from complete absence of cost control. She was buying fabric at retail prices, accepting orders without deposits, extending credit to people who never paid. "You're making money," Clara said. "You're just not keeping any of it. Can you help?" Clara thought about it. She had enough on her plate: house, children, Ethan's growing business. Taking on someone else's shop was asking for trouble, but she remembered standing in that records office in York, finding the documents that saved their home. Remembered Sarah Harding's grateful tears. Remembered what it felt like to need help and actually receive it. "I'll help," she said, "but I need full access to your accounts and the authority to make changes." "Anything." They spent 2 weeks reorganizing the shop. Clara implemented the same system she'd built for the Reed household, tracked expenses, negotiated better fabric prices, established a deposit policy, cut off customers with unpaid debts over 3 months old. Mrs. Harding resisted at first, but Mrs. Green has been buying on credit for years. And she owes you £12. When was the last time she paid anything? Well, never. She's never paying. Cut her off. But she'll be angry. Let her be angry somewhere else. Within a month, the shop was profitable. Mrs. Harding caught up on rent with money to spare. She tried to pay Clara. For all your work, I don't want payment. I want you to teach Alice to sew properly. That's all? That's everything. She needs practical skills, things she can use. Word spread fast in a small village. By February, Clara had 3 more women asking for help, a baker drowning in debt, a widow trying to manage her late husband's carpentry business, a farmer's wife whose husband drank away the profits. Clara helped them all. Not for money. For the same reason she'd helped Sarah Harding, because she could. But it was Ethan who saw what she was building. You're creating something, he said one evening, watching her review accounts for the baker. A network. Women helping women. I'm just fixing problems. You're showing them they can fix their own problems. That's bigger. Clara hadn't thought of it that way. But he was right. Each woman she helped started helping others. Mrs. Harding taught sewing to 3 girls who couldn't afford apprenticeships. The baker started mentoring a young woman who wanted to open her own shop. The farmer's wife confronted her husband and took control of their finances. Small revolutions spreading quietly. By March, something shifted in how the village saw Clara. She wasn't the mysterious outsider anymore. She was the woman you went to when things fell apart. And that brought attention. The letter arrived on a gray Tuesday. Official seal, expensive paper. Clara opened it with dread, expecting another threat. Instead, she found an invitation. Mrs. Clara Reed, the Yorkshire Women's Education Society requests your presence at our annual assembly in Leeds on April 12th. We understand you have been instrumental in helping local women achieve financial independence through practical education and mentorship. We would be honored if you would speak to our members about your methods. Yours sincerely, Lady Catherine Thornberry, President, YWES. Clara read it 3 times. They want me to speak, she told Ethan, to a society in Leeds. About what you've been doing? Apparently. Are you going? Clara's first instinct was to refuse. Public speaking, to wealthy, educated women, she'd be exposed, judged, found wanting. Then she thought about the women she'd helped, about Sarah Harding and Mrs. Harding and all the others who'd come to her door desperate. If she could reach more of them, help more of them, wasn't that worth the discomfort? I'm going, she said. The assembly was held in a grand hall that reminded Clara uncomfortably of the world she'd left behind. Chandeliers, expensive dresses, that particular perfume of privilege. She almost turned around. Then she saw the women, not just wealthy ladies playing at charity, real women, shopkeepers' wives, teachers, widows managing businesses, women with ink-stained fingers and practical dresses and hungry eyes. Lady Catherine Thornberry greeted her warmly. Mrs. Reed, thank you for coming. We've heard remarkable things about your work. I'm not sure it's that remarkable. You've helped a dozen women achieve financial stability in 6 months. That's more than most charitable organizations accomplish in years. She led Clara to a seat at the front. Tell us how you do it. Clara stood before 50 women and felt her mouth go dry. Then she saw a face in the 3rd row. Sarah Harding, the first woman she'd helped, smiling encouragement. Clara took a breath and started talking. Not about theory or philosophy, about practice. She explained how she'd reorganized Mrs. Harding's accounts, how she'd taught the baker to track costs, how she'd helped the widow negotiate with suppliers. Concrete actions, real results. The women leaned forward, taking notes. The key, Clara said, is understanding that most women aren't financially ignorant. They're financially excluded. They've been told money is men's work, that they can't understand it, that they shouldn't try. And how do you counter that? Someone asked. By showing them they already understand it. Every woman who runs a household understands budgets, costs, allocation of resources. It's the same skills, just applied differently. She talked for an hour, answered questions for another 30 minutes. When she finished, the applause was genuine and sustained. Afterward, women crowded around her, asking advice, sharing their own struggles, exchanging ideas. Lady Catherine pulled her aside. Would you consider doing this again? We have chapters in Manchester, Sheffield, York. They all need what you're offering. I'm not qualified. You're more qualified than anyone I know. You've actually done it, built something from nothing. That's worth more than any degree. Clara agreed to think about it. On the train home, she stared out the window and tried to process what had just happened. She'd left the Duke's world because she didn't want to be ornamental, didn't want to be managed. And somehow, she'd ended up mattering more than she ever had in that life. Spring came late, but fierce. The garden exploded with growth. Ethan's business expanded. He hired an assistant and took on larger projects. Alice turned 11 and started helping Clara with bookkeeping. James discovered he had a talent for drawing maps and began learning surveying from his father. The house stopped being a place they were fixing and became a place they'd built. One evening in May, Clara was preparing dinner when Alice said, "Mother," she still stumbled over the words sometimes. "There's someone at the door. He says he knows you." Clara wiped her hands and went to the door, expecting a client or neighbor. Instead, she found Adrian Hale. He looked different, thinner, older. Something in his eyes had changed. "Clara, I know I shouldn't be here." "Then why are you?" "I'm getting married. Next month." He said it quickly, like ripping off a bandage. "To Eleanor Cartwright. You probably don't know her." Clara didn't. "Congratulations. She's nice, sensible. We understand each other. I'm happy for you." Adrian looked at her, really looked, at her simple dress, her flower-dusted apron, her work-roughened hands. "You look happy," he said. "I am. I came to apologize. For my mother, for the property claim, for—" He gestured vaguely. "Everything. Your mother already apologized, in her way." "I know, but I needed to say it myself." He glanced past her into the house. "Is this what you wanted? This life?" Clara thought about it, about the early days of terror and uncertainty, about fighting creditors and duchesses, and her own fear. "No," she said honestly. "I didn't want this. I wanted security, comfort, a clear path forward." Adrian's expression shifted. Vindication, maybe. "But what I wanted was wrong. What I needed was this. Purpose, agency, people who see me as more than a transaction." She met his eyes. "So I'm glad I didn't get what I wanted. I got something better." "Better than being a duchess?" "Better than being your duchess. Someone else might be perfect for that, but I would have been miserable." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "I wish I'd understood that sooner." "So do I. It would have saved us both a lot of trouble." He smiled, sad but real. "Eleanor knows. About you. About how I treated you. She's making sure I do better." "Good. She sounds smart." "She is." He straightened. "I should go. I just needed to see that you were all right." "I'm more than all right." After he left, Ethan appeared in the hallway. That was him. "Yes." "You all right?" Clara thought about it. A year ago, seeing Adrian would have sent her spiraling, doubt, regret, what-ifs. Now she felt nothing but mild curiosity about how his life would turn out. "I'm perfect," she said. "Liar. You're adequate at best." Clara laughed and kissed him. Adequate is my favorite word. Summer brought Clara's biggest challenge yet. The Yorkshire Women's Education Society wanted to expand, create a formal program teaching financial literacy to women across the county, and they wanted Clara to run it. It would be a paid position, Lady Catherine explained over tea in Clara's parlor. £30 a year plus expenses. You travel to different chapters, train instructors, develop curriculum. Clara's mind raced. £30 was nearly as much as Ethan made surveying. Combined, they'd be comfortable. More than comfortable. "I have responsibilities here," Clara said. "Children, a household. We'd work around that. Monthly trips, perhaps. 3 to 4 days each time." It was tempting, but Clara had learned to recognize the difference between opportunities that expanded her life and ones that consumed it. "Can I think about it?" "Of course." That night, Clara talked it through with Ethan. "You should do it," he said immediately. "The children will be fine. Alice is practically running the household accounts already. James is old enough to help, and I'm here. But it would mean being gone, missing things. It would mean helping hundreds of women instead of dozens. That matters, Clara. She knew he was right, but there was something else holding her back. I'm scared, she admitted. This is bigger than anything I've done. What if I fail? Then you'll fail and learn from it and try again. Ethan took her hands. You've been failing forward your entire life. Why stop now? Clara laughed despite her anxiety. Failing forward, that's one way to put it. It's the only way. You failed at being the perfect duchess, succeeded at being yourself, failed at being just a housekeeper, succeeded at being something bigger. He kissed her forehead. Stop being afraid of outgrowing small spaces. She took the position. The first 6 months were brutal, learning to teach teachers, developing materials that worked for women with different education levels, traveling while managing guilt about being away from home. But slowly, it worked. By autumn, the YWES had chapters in 8 cities. Over 300 women had gone through Clara's financial literacy program. Dozens had started businesses. Some had left bad marriages. Others had taken control of family finances and transformed their households. The ripple effects were staggering. In November, Clara received a letter that made her stop breathing. Mrs. Reed, I am writing to inform you that you have been nominated for the Queen's Award for Public Service in recognition of your work advancing women's financial education. If selected, you will be invited to London for the presentation ceremony. Yours truly, Sir Richard Pemberton. Secretary to Her Majesty. Clara read it to Ethan, her voice shaking. The Queen's Award, he said. That's impossible. There's been a mistake. Or you've done something remarkable and people noticed. I just helped a few women with their accounts. You built a system that's helping hundreds, that's changing lives, that's worth recognizing. Clara wanted to dismiss it, but deep down she felt something else. Pride. Real, earned, unashamed pride in what she'd accomplished. The ceremony was in January, held at a grand hall in London that made Clara's skin crawl with memories. She almost didn't go. Then Alice said, You have to go. You earned this. So Clara went, wearing a dress she'd made herself. Nice, but not ostentatious. She brought Ethan, because facing the world that had rejected her felt easier with him beside her. The hall was full of nobility, officials, important people. Clara felt profoundly out of place. Then she saw Margaret Hale. The Dowager Duchess sat in the second row, perfectly composed. She saw Clara and inclined her head. Not quite approval, but acknowledgement. The ceremony proceeded with speeches and presentations. Clara barely heard them, too busy trying not to panic. Then her name was called. Mrs. Clara Reed for exceptional service in advancing women's economic independence through practical education. Clara walked to the front on shaking legs, accepted the medal from a royal official, stood while people applauded, and realized something profound. This mattered more than any title she'd walked away from, because she'd earned it. Not through birth or marriage, but through work, through helping people, through refusing to accept that her value was tied to someone else's name. Afterward, Margaret approached. Congratulations, Mrs. Reed. Thank you, Your Grace. I underestimated you spectacularly. Margaret's smile was thin but genuine. I thought walking away from my son was cowardice. I see now it was courage. I'm not sure it was either. It was just necessary. Nevertheless, Margaret paused. For what it's worth, Adrian is happy. His wife is strong-willed and practical. She keeps him honest. I'm glad. As am I. Margaret turned to leave, then stopped. You've done more with your freedom than most people do with every advantage. That's worth something. After she left, Ethan said, Did she just apologize? In her way, yes. Think you'll ever forgive her? Clara thought about it, about the fear and anger and desperation Margaret had caused. I don't need to forgive her. I just needed to outlive her control over me. They left London that night and went home to Helmsley, to their house with the patched roof and expanded garden, to their children who were growing too fast, to their messy, imperfect, absolutely real life. Spring came again, marking 2 years since Clara had walked away. She stood in the garden, watching Ethan teach James to use surveying equipment while Alice read nearby. The house behind them was solid, permanent, theirs. Sarah Harding approached from the road, waving. She'd become Clara's assistant in the YWES program, traveling with her to teach women about legal rights. "Ready for next week?" Sarah asked. "Manchester wants us to train 20 new instructors." "As ready as I'll ever be." They discussed logistics while Alice and James argued about something inconsequential, and Ethan laughed at their bickering. This was Clara's life now. Work that mattered, people she loved, impact that rippled beyond anything she could have achieved as a duchess. That evening, after the children were asleep, Clara and Ethan sat in their bedroom. "I've been thinking," Ethan said. "Dangerous. We should buy more land. The parcel next to ours just came available. We could expand, build a proper workshop for my surveying business." "That would take most of our savings." "I know, but we'd be investing in our future, building something to pass down." Clara thought about it, about the risk and the reward, about how they'd built everything they had through calculated gambles. "Let's do it," she said. "Really? Really? We're good at building things from nothing. Might as well build bigger." They bought the land, built the workshop, expanded further than they'd ever planned. And it worked. Because they worked. Together. 1 year later, Clara received another letter. This one from Edmund. "Cousin Clara, I've been following your work with interest. The textile mill I mentioned is finally opening. I'm still in need of someone to manage the business operations. I know you declined before, but the offer stands. With better terms. £50 a year. Full autonomy. Partnership stake. You've proven yourself capable of anything. This would give you a platform to do it at scale. Consider it." Edmund Clara showed it to Ethan without comment. He read it twice. "That's a fortune." "It is." "You could help thousands of women. Real power to make change." "I could." "But you're not going to take it," Clara smiled. "No." "Why not?" "Because I already have what matters. Impact doesn't require scale. Sometimes it just requires showing up, day after day, for the people in front of you. That's wise. Or it's stubborn. Can be both." Clara wrote back to Edmund, thanking him but declining. Then she went back to her work, teaching, mentoring, building her network of women, helping women. Small revolutions. Quiet victories. Lives changed one conversation at a time. It wasn't grand, it wasn't glorious, but it was hers. 5 years after walking away from the Duke, Clara stood in her expanded garden and took stock. Alice was 16 now, preparing to attend a teacher's college, the first woman in the family to do so. James, 14, had decided he wanted to be an architect and was apprenticing with a firm in York. Ethan's business employed 3 surveyors and had contracts across northern England. Clara's financial literacy program had trained over 1,000 women. The YWES had established a permanent scholarship fund in her name. They'd paid off their debts, built a stable life, created something that would outlast them. Not bad for a woman who'd started with 40 pounds in terror. Ethan found her there, in the garden, and wrapped his arms around her from behind. "What are you thinking about?" "How different everything is." "Good different?" "The best different." They stood together, watching the sun set over land they owned, future they'd built, life they'd chosen. "Do you ever miss it?" Ethan asked. "The life you could have had?" Clara thought about it honestly, about balls and estates and the performance of nobility. "Not even a little." "Not even the nice dresses?" "I make better dresses now." He laughed. "Fair point." That night, Clara wrote in the journal Ethan had given her years ago. She'd filled 3 volumes already with observations, plans, records of the women she'd helped. She opened to a fresh page and wrote, 5 years ago, I walked away from security because I refused to be manageable. Today I realized I didn't lose anything that mattered. I just made room for everything that did. I built a life. Not inherited, not given, built. And that makes all the difference." She closed the journal and went downstairs, where Ethan was reading by the fire, and the house was warm and solid around them. This was Clara's kingdom, not vast or impressive, not newsworthy or grand, just real, just hers, just enough. And for a woman who'd once had everything the world said should matter, that was the greatest victory of all. The story could end there, Woman walks away, builds new life, finds happiness. But Clara's story didn't end. It expanded. Over the next decade, she became a fixture in the women's education movement, not famous exactly, but known, respected, sought after. She wrote a book, Practical Economics for Practical Women, that became required reading in progressive schools. She testified before Parliament about women's property rights. She trained hundreds of teachers who went on to train thousands more. And through it all, she stayed rooted in Helmsley, in her garden, in her family, in the small daily work of showing up for the people who needed her. Alice became a headmistress. James designed affordable housing for working families. Ethan's surveying business became the most respected in the North. And Clara, manageable, unsuitable Clara, became the woman people pointed to when they said women could build their own futures. She never forgot where she'd started, the terror of walking away, the uncertainty of those first months, the constant fear that she'd made a catastrophic mistake, but she also never regretted it, because the woman who'd walked away from the Duke in the dark had been brave enough to choose uncertainty over compromise. And that woman had built something extraordinary from nothing. Years later, when Clara was old and silver-haired and surrounded by grandchildren, someone asked her what she'd learned. That walking away from the wrong thing is just as important as walking toward the right one, she said. Maybe more. And how do you know which is which? Clara thought about it, about Adrian calling her manageable, about that moment of crystallization when she'd decided dying slowly in a gilded cage wasn't living. You know when staying costs more than leaving, when safety feels like suffocation, when being protected means being diminished. She smiled. Then you walk, and you figure out the rest as you go. Wasn't that terrifying? Absolutely. But you know what's more terrifying? Getting to the end of your life and realizing you never tried to live it. That became Clara's legacy. Not the awards or the books or the programs, but the permission she gave other women to choose themselves, to walk away from wrong things, to build right ones, to refuse to be manageable. And in the end, that mattered more than any title ever could. Clara Reed, formerly Whitmore, almost a duchess, actually something far more important, died at 83 in her garden, surrounded by family. Her last words were to Alice's daughter, who was struggling with the decision about leaving a loveless engagement. Be brave enough to walk away, Clara said, and smart enough to build something better. The girl did, and the ripple continued. Because that's how revolutions really happen, not through grand gestures or dramatic speeches, but through one woman, then another, choosing to value themselves enough to demand better. Clara had been one of those women. Not the first, not the last, but one of the ones who mattered. And in a life full of choices, some good, some terrible, all hers, that was more than enough.